You're back, and I'm back. Hello, we're here. This is an audio production called Breaking Change, and my name is Justin Searles. I'm glad to be here today because, well, first of all, because you're listening, and we get a chance to just chat, shoot the shit about whatever it is that's going on in the world today. Uh, Instead of having even though I have seemingly fallen into a distressingly consistent bi-weekly cycle of publishing these audio productions, these podcasts, if you will. I refuse to call this a bi-weekly show because then that's the moment when I'd lose all motivation and I'd want to go either a month between shows or want to do two a week, right? So this just happens. It happens when it happens, and it seems to always just happen to fall in place right around the 2 week mark, because that's just when the news pot starts overflowing with bullshit. I was taking a walk with Becky. We're not a couple who walks typically, because as I walk, I get angrier. So actually, when all movement leads to me just getting angrier, I go on my runs to relax, and most of that's just the me emitting and exhausting anger out of my body. Or I'll walk fast. Like last night, we were meeting my friend Dave and his family for dinner, and we had to walk fast, hustle a little bit because I misjudged the time of the reservation, and I had to kind of pick up my step. I was briskly walking, and by the time I got there, I was like, "Uh-oh, remember, take a breath. You're mad now because activity angers you." So we're not normally walking people because it's a great way to spoil for a fight, at least on my end of the table. But we were taking a walk this morning, and we were discussing the how disappointing it is that for most of the run of this program, we're here. This is version 33 of the show. Again, we use versions, not time-based ways of incrementing. We're here, and so many of the episodes have been dominated by AI, LLM, machine learning, and the related pyramid scheme, dystopia that we exist in. News, whether it's all the big companies are chasing the AI bubble, that's where the investors are. It's where all the hustle bros are currently living. And the rest of us are just trying to figure out what is this? What is going on? Can I use this? Is this useful? This seems like it's wasting me a lot of time, but people who claim to be smarter than me, or at least act like they're smarter than me, are acting like this is working really well. And every now and then you'll see a flash of inspiration, be like, whoa, AI, this is real. But it's caught in this state of arrested development, and it feels to me like the news isn't moving us forward. It's not 2 steps back, 1 step forward. It feels like we're kind of going in circles around a set number of narratives having to do with AI. And I worry that there's just enough genuine utility here that this is going to be a decade of just bullshit. Like this is what we're in for. This is going to be like, this is just like how, I guess if you hated the idea of mobile phones or cell phones, right? Or gadgets, right? Like if you're like an old stick in the mud and you're like, I like my brawn, I like my like very analog lifestyle. I'm a Radio Shack guy, right? And all this digital shit starts piling up and just clogging up the people's attention. I worry that we're just going to be attentionally focused on AI too much. And so, yeah, write in if I'm talking about AI stuff too much. But like when I read news and see stuff going on, it's just a disproportionate amount of coverage is about AI, which is fine, and a lot of that is outrageous. And both of those things are like, I should rant about that on my podcast audio show. And so here I end up talking about it, perhaps too much. But anyway, 2 week mark, we end up getting to a lot of news. And before I break this up into 33.1 and 33.2, you don't need a fucking mini series here. Let's just get into it. Version 33, as mentioned, probably title it Agentish. It's between Agentish or Apathetic Intelligence. Those are both in contention. You'll find out which one it is because you've already looked at your podcast player or your YouTubes. Uh, yeah. All right. Well, some life updates. Speaking of marriage, in addition to being bad at taking walks, I'm bad at tolerating even the smallest bit of clutter in my life. There's designated zones where clutter can occur in very uh, limited time, engagements. Like if I'm in the middle of a project and maybe it needs a couple days, or I got pulled away, and I've got my workbench where I can, leave stuff there and not wake up in the middle of the night being like, is there a counter that's not fully cleared off, right? And part of it's just, being a control freak. Part of it is I think more clearly when the deck is cleared. Just like I think more clearly when my to-do list is mostly empty and I know that I'm not dropping any balls. I think there's some sinew there to my physical space. But one of the things about cohabitating with somebody is you end up having to reach agreements on how clean do we need our place to be, right? Because the experience that I had in college, and I may have talked about this before, is my roommate liked things just the moment in my roommate's head where he said this room is too dirty, this too cluttered, was an inch below mine. And he realized, like, oh, if I just clean it up and then resent Justin for not cleaning our dorm room, like I'm cleaning all the time and I'm resentful and he doesn't learn his lesson. But then he realized if he just, waits an extra day, my like internal thermometer for this is too messy goes off and then I clean the room. And so it was sort of like that marshmallow experiment, except it was, trying to kind of coerce somebody without ever coming to an explicit agreement about like who cleans and when and divvying up chores and having some kind of calendar. Well, anyway, like about a year ago, something that Becky and I started doing, maybe 2 years ago, is every Thursday morning or Friday morning, we have like a set time in the calendar and we call it a tidy party and we play music and we simultaneously just tidy up the house. And we go from room to room and, it's kind of like a dance party, but like more productive. Kind of like fill in the blank, but more productive is very on brand for me. And so the house is usually pretty tidy. One important ingredient is kids are not allowed in the home. Just never we love having house guests. And if they have kids, we've got a great list of hotel recommendations. But kids are fucking gross. So are pets. They just get shit everywhere and they're disgusting. Yeah, life is better without them. So, pro tip. So anyway, I was having a tidy party last week, and I realized because I was on my watch, I had to say "Hey Dingus" to it, and because my phone was in range, normally the phone's like very far away. We live in a big house, and the phone's far away, and normally the watch is connecting directly to the internet when it's most of the places in the house, or if I'm on my run, I don't run with my phone. And I start talking to Dingus, and it screws up. And I think it's because the phone is handling the request, which goes through the new Apple Intelligence Siri, but not like the actually good Apple Intelligence Siri, just like it's a different, it's slightly improved. Like Apple has said that if you have Apple Intelligence, Siri changes a little bit. We don't tell you how. Like the only concrete example of how it's supposed to be different is if you say or oh, actually never mind in the middle of a sentence. It'll like wind back in its little context and allow you to correct yourself mid sentence, which is great. But it also apparently seems to work worse. And so I've recently picked up on the fact that I am reaching for this old iPad mini to talk to Siri more often, or using my HomePods than doing it on my phone or my watch when my phone is around. Because when I'm on my run, I realize like, oh, it always nails the reminder that I'm doing. It's because my phone is far away and Apple Watch doesn't support Apple Intelligence. So that's cool. Not totally sure if that's how it works. It could be that when I'm in the house and I'm using AirPods, the phone's the thing pairing it, and so it's the AirPods connection that's pulling this off. But fortunately for me, the news has been chock-a-block with, hey, why does Siri suck so much going on right now? And Apple is approaching antenna gate levels of media distress. Kuo, the guy who leaks supply chain stuff, but sometimes masquerades as a, uh, you know, analyst, right? A pundit when it comes to Apple things. He's demanding like, oh, they should go on stage and do the antenna gate thing, and Tim Cook should, do a ceremonial bow for 60 seconds and sincerely, and prostrate himself. Either prostrate himself or prostrate himself. If you went to church as a kid and you sang hymns, you were probably also confused about those two words. But speaking of Apple Watch, I don't give it enough credit. We're at the time of year where we're moving from cold Florida, where it's merely like 60 degrees Fahrenheit, to nice Florida, where today it's going to hit 87. With spring ahead, in daylight savings time. Now every day's a pool day. We wake up, it's gorgeous. There's still sunlight when we're eating dinner. It's a great day to barbecue every day. It's a great day to be at the pool every day. Life here is rad, and I wish daylight savings time was all the time. But as we transition out of winter, I'm in this sort of zone where I got used to not using the pool, but rather using the sauna every day. And now I'm in this weird mode of like, I kind of just live in the backyard as I tiptoe into the waters of the pool because it's warm now, but still have this habit of also using the sauna. I'm just kind of going between the two a lot and working out there. So actually have not been in this office too much. And I just had the thought the other day, it's like, not only is the Apple Watch like really good at handling water now, I found actually that the Series 10 handles water way better than the Ultra did. Less water gets ingressioned into the device, and so the microphone keeps working more without having to manually tell it, hey, click the little water icon in Control Center and eject the water. That's great. But it's also gotten really good with heat. Like, I'm in the sauna for a long ass time at maximum temperature, and it never feels hot against my skin. Whereas my Kindle stops working after a while, my MacBook stops working after a while, my iPad says it needs to cool down. And I don't think we give Apple enough credit for the just physical constraints under which the Apple Watch works really well. In fact, I kind of would like them to make me an iPhone that is just made out of Apple Watches, because working well in sunlight and high temperatures is kind of the only time I'm using my phone, because I don't use it around the house, because I'm a fucking, degenerate who has a lot of devices, and why would you use the worst device in your house for everything? So if you're Apple and you're listening, please make your things work in sunlight. In fact, maybe the back of the next phone could just be an e-ink screen. Wouldn't that be nice? Read books and get rid of the Kindle. Speaking of pool stuff, I had a bad experience. So I was out of signal. I was away from America for a moment. And so I didn't get a text message from my pool guy. And apparently the text message was a long RCS message, because he's not an iPhone person. I've noticed that most of the people in my life, the Green Bubble tribe, are the contractors in my life, because the Blue Bubbles are, why. So I missed the message because it was not an iMessage. It was rather an RCS message. And the message said, hey, I'm your pool guy, and I quit. And so I've sold the route to these other folks. And I missed it. I didn't know. I later learned this via screenshots from the people. Because new person was like, all right, we're on our way to your pool. And I was like, I haven't added you to the gate. I don't know who you are. Florida is like just a thieves' den of liars and scammers. So like, I don't trust you. Like, until I hear from current guy, you're not coming. I don't mean to be an asshole here, but like, I don't know you from anybody. Well, I get a hold of the other guy. He's like, I've got another full-time job. I just can't keep up. So these people are more serious. You'll be in good hands. They'll pick you up at the same price. They'll probably do a better job. I was like, oh, okay. Well, be well, and so forth. And he said, well, I'm going to charge you, though. I'm going to invoice you for this last month. And I was like, okay, cool. He's like, yeah, same email as usual. And this has been my pool guy for 2 years now. And I was like, oh, same email. Do you have my email? I've never gotten an email from you. And I gave him my email address, and he's like, yeah, so funny story. I've never billed you, it turns out. He's like, I can't, you've never paid. And I'm supposed to be paying this guy like 125 a month or whatever. He like goes above and beyond and fills the pool when it's low and drains the pool when it's full. And I've never paid him. He's like, well, is it okay if I bill you for this month? And I was like, yeah. Like, I've stolen several $1,000s from you over 2.5 years, man. Like, thanks for not back charging me completely. Well, I talked to my brother about it, and he actually had recommended this pool guy before starting to do his own pool stuff. And it turns out that he just kept on billing my brother that whole time. So my brother's been paying for the pool, but I'm the one getting mine cleaned. So it all works out. The reason I didn't have signal was I was on a bro cruise with said brother. His name is Jeremy. He's a programmer like me. He's my co-CJO at Searles LLC. I like to I don't like cruising, right? I went on a cruise in January. I like being off the grid. I like not having internet access. I like having to turn my being able to turn my brain off a little bit. It allows me to be more present with whoever I'm with. So like in January for our 40th birthdays, we talked about going on the new Royal Caribbean Utopia of the Seas ship, Becky and I. And we had a great time. It was super chill. We got a really neato suite, upgraded to the nines, and service was wonderful. Food was great. So with my brother, because we don't matter, we just got like the cheapest room on the ship. It would cost a fifth as much. Got to see how the other half lived in the still very fabulous ship. And yeah, we had a great time. We it's sort of like a, corporate retreat for Searles LLC, I guess, because we did a lot of planning of the, he's helping me a lot with planning out Posse Party and how that's going to work and that potential market, and helping kind of cover some of my blind spots, because like I tend to just build things for me and only me and what I would want, and he tends to think about like what would actually work for other people and be marketable, which is a handy skill to have, it turns out. And so we were, having a good time. And the last night we went to a comedy show. And I'd hyped this up because Becky and I went to a comedy show on the ship that we'd been on. And it was in a small room. And the first comedian was great. And the second comedian died. But it was like a classical death. It was he's not very good and this room isn't vibing. Which is like you go out, you see some live comedy. That's just going to happen, right? He did not handle it particularly well, but whatever. He's the professional. I sold him on this comedy show on the ship, and it was in the big theater. It was like, this is the general population comedy now. And the cruise director, the assistant cruise director, she pointed out, intros the comedy as, this is the adult comedy. No kids here. It was whatever phenotype of human is tracked to become a cruise director is the exact fucking opposite of the person that I want to spend more than 30 seconds with in my life. If you fill out one of those surveys as a kid of like, I should be a race car driver or something, if it says cruise director, just steer clear, dude. Like, I am not wired that way, and I'm just repulsed by cruise director energy. So put up with the intro and whatnot is like a little bit hammy and faux energetic, phony generally, right? And the comedian comes out, and he's a little older, white guy, rural Alabama, okay. And all of his comedy was just denigrating other poor people. Like, oh, look at these people from Walmart, like, who, I won't even repeat. It was real bad. It wasn't funny. It was just base. It was sort of like somebody watched a Jeff Foxworthy thing in the 90s or a Larry the Cable Guy thing, but then didn't really even understand any of the irony in either of those. Not to say they're good. And just kind of like leaned into just mean-spirited comments. And I guess that makes it adult, right? You're swearing, you're saying sexualized things about people, and racist, did the slanty eyes gesture when talking about Chinese folks and people. And it was just not funny, right? You can be super offensive and lewd and be fucking hilarious. You just need to have a point. Well, yeah, there was no point. It was just talking, right? Talking down to, Mississippi people. I'm a Dollar General person, but these Walmart people are so dumb. That kind of thing. So fucking weird. And then after a few minutes, it was an 8 o'clock show. It's not like everyone in the room is lit. I mean, there's lots of people have the drinks package. I'm sure there's a lot of drinking going on. People want to have fun. They want to be part of the thing at the comedy show. This is how fascism starts, right? People want to like vibe with the audience. Again, maybe more people like who aspire to be a cruise director. For me, I'm more subversive and I have no interest in this. Man, they were eating it the fuck up. The whole goddamn audience, the whole room was just uproariously laughing. He was killing it from his perspective. Brother and I look at each other and we're like, we live in Florida. We see both sides of the aisle frequently. We have lots of friends across all sorts of different spectrums, but we don't really spend a whole lot of time with rural, poor white people. But man, like, it's too bad we're not funding education more. I literally flabbergasted. Like, how do they even afford to be on this boat? Now I know this is, I'm getting to the point where I'm saying some things that might sound prejudicial towards uneducated racist idiots. But also, it just like this is America is playing through my head over and over again. And yeah, I don't know. I was ready to go home after that. Yeah, that was a bit of a, it's good to be reminded of who we are. We're kind of going through that in a lot of ways as a nation and as a planet right now. So it's, it's their turn, right? And they're having a good time with it. They're feeling very comfortable. But good fucking Lord. Maybe the AIs will save us by just taking over. That's what else is going on in life? Not a lot else. We're wrapping up, or no, well, I guess we're still in the throes of spring break season. I sort of only just recently started. So I got some friends coming to town. I got some relatives coming next week. It's a great time. The weather's going to be fantastic. Food's always good. Managed to only gain 2 pounds on the cruise. I got home the day after. The thing is, when I travel, I don't drink 7 liters of Soda Stream every day. And so I always get back from a trip and it's like, I'm down 5 pounds. Look at me. And it's like, no, I'm just dehydrated as fuck. And then one day later, I'm up 3 pounds. That's an 8-point swing. How did I do that? But no, it's, if you got the tools to manage your diet and exercise and calories in, calories out and your macros and whatnot, it's like you can do some damage on a 3-night cruise and then come back to it and be back to normal in a couple weeks, right? So the experience is worth it sometimes to just like let go, have a good time. The experience is worth it. Just do whatever the fuck you want in life, sure. But also I'm kind of committed to not letting my body entirely fall apart. I'm going to click the follow-up button now because I just made myself sad. What do we got? Upgrading to Tailwind 4. So this is a follow-up because if you are a programmer and you watched my final presentation where I announced that I was retiring from speaking back at Rails World last September, one of the 6 or 7 things that I talked about was Tailwind and how Tailwind is really cool as a way to style web applications and websites, even if you're not a designer. But if you're willing to take on the task of understanding what the hell CSS is and how it works, even at a basic level, Tailwind provides a way to write styles that is in line with your templates. So your HTML lives right there. If you're using like a declarative JavaScript tool like HTMX or Stimulus, it's all just in one place, right? This one markup listing kind of tells you, oh, this is how it looks, and this is how it behaves, and this is the content all in one place. And that's very convenient. I pushed Tailwind in the talk. And while I was doing it, my thought in my back of my head was, I hope this... There are very good reasons why this won't be another Bootstrap kind of thing where you make one app in this, CSS framework like Bootstrap was very popular over a decade ago. And then everyone realizes upgrading the thing was such a nightmare that you'd end up just with these sites that all look the same as every other site, but also like you can't really change them easily. You can't update them very easily. And so for me, because I started in Tailwind Major version 3, they have breaking changes too. And now version 4 is out. And I came with an upgrader tool, and I was reading the upgrade guide, and I was like, this is a fucking nightmare. I really hope. And fortunately, we've all learned a lot of lessons. The library authors, they've learned the lesson that if you plan carefully about what your breaking changes are, and you have like a long deprecation timeline, and you put a little bit of like an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure when it comes to coming up with your APIs in the first place. And so if you've been writing open source for a while, creating libraries or frameworks for a while, people just generally, a lot of the norms and conventions about how frameworks look tend to be more forward compatible than the proto frameworks, especially web frameworks of 15, 20 years ago. And so that's one reason why things aren't as bad as they used to be. The other reason is, as a programmer, and this is a songbook I've been singing from for a long time, for most of my career, is reduce the number of dependencies you have, hew to defaults whenever it's acceptable to, before you go customize or go off the rails and do some third-party thing just because you like how the syntax looks a little bit different. And if you stay on the golden path and do things exactly as documented as the normal median developer would do, that upgrade path is going to be easiest and widest for you. And the more you customize, you're going to have to figure out how to port forward those customizations. And so you got to be thinking about the carrying cost of every single little bespoke thing that you add. The combination of these two things make it so that, like, generally upgrades aren't so bad. But Tailwind CSS is famously an unsolved problem. Very few programmers feel really good about it. Very few designers feel good across different frameworks or utility systems. And over time, most things just become unmaintainable balls of yarn. And so the true test of Tailwind, even though on a philosophical and an academic level, it seemed like it would work pretty well long term and be something that they could radically even update the internals of and continue to support, that style, that system. Well, I upgraded Tailwind for Posse Party's homepage, which is just a single page right now. It explains what the site is, what the application will be when I launch it later this year. And that was only a little bit confusing. There were a few things in there that were new to me, and my friend Pixel Janitor Derek Briggs pointed out, like, here's how the setup changes. A lot happens more in CSS variables. Now it's all good under the hood, right? So my custom setup is actually a lot leaner, and it gets the same amount of work done. But that was greenfield. That was essentially all brand new because I hadn't actually made any pages yet, even though I started with a version 3 installation of Tailwind. And now here I am at Tailwind 4, upgrading to this morning and yesterday, upgrading justin.searles.co, my website, from 3 to 4, and it was less fun. It was a lot of little things. The default spacing changes. So I got to go back to my kind of what is now custom spacing. I've got to, I ran the upgrade tool and it changed the order of several of what are called variants. This is all, if you're not a programmer, excuse me, feel free to skip ahead here, but I'll try to be brief. It changed some order of some variants inside of class names. And I was like, well, wow, that must be very smart. That must be, wow, it's very clever. And over the course of the last day and a half, I realized that every single upgrade problem I had was because the upgrade tool was changing the order of these things, thinking that it was smarter than me, and it wasn't. It's like, none of the navigation works. Okay, none of the fucking, the search box now, like none of my customizations and overrides are being applied. Oh, none of my overrides for typography is being overridden. And all I had to do was undo everything the upgrade tool did, and then I was fixed. So cool. Let's see. I don't know, man. Like a day and a half to totally upgrade a build system for CSS, for I would say a medium complexity website, all things considered. It's simple, it's straightforward, but there is actually quite a lot going on because I don't have a job, and so I just do stupid things like work on my website a lot. Overall, I think it went pretty better than a lot of other major undertakings around CSS. But it was. I'm looking now at Becky's, built better with Becky's system, which is also on Tailwind 3, and thinking about upgrading that to 4. And wouldn't say dreading, but not super excited. But then again, Tailwind 4 comes with a lot of new stuff. Way better to do it now than when Tailwind 5 fucking comes out, because that just makes it harder. So you got to bite the bullet. If you're gonna use something and you're gonna keep maintaining a system, you gotta keep upgrading. It's just that, again, the carrying cost is like, well, I did choose to use Tailwind. I could have just written plain old fucking CSS, and that's gonna keep working, right? So that's on me. But you're constantly balancing the uplift that you get from the tool and the cost of dragging it into the future along with you. And over time, those streams will cross, but it's still worth it if the alternative was you roll everything on your own and you never ship the product in the first place, right? So, yeah, that's my Tailwind story. I'm sticking to it. I mentioned we're news heavy, so we're going to go straight into the pun. Now get ready, because I'm going to click this stinger and you're going to think, this is depressing. And it's depressing because puns are terrible and you shouldn't say them. Except for when I'm saying them, then they're cool. All right, I'm going to pull this down here. I got this iMessage from Aaron yesterday. I said I needed a pun or else I will literally die, and he obliged. Thank you, Aaron. Okay, check it out. It's an invisible ink, so I'm scrubbing that away. You got a pre-read chuckle from me. Every time I go to the gym, I'm like, how's that working out? Every time I go to the gym, I'm like, how's that working out? So normally when you throw that phrase, how's that working out, you're doing it in a dialogue with somebody else. Like Aaron's like, yeah, I got to go to the gym. And then I reply from the couch eating potato chips. How's that working out for you? Right. And I guess the implication is, maybe looking at Aaron, he hasn't met all of his health goals, right? Or maybe he looks miserable because working out fucking sucks, which is one of the many things that Aaron and I are well aligned on. I do not want to work out. I just am getting older, and the routine maintenance list keeps getting longer. Like when you buy a car, and it's like, oh wow, no maintenance stuff for 30,000 miles, and then it's like, okay, so like after 30, every 15, I got to rotate the tires, and then every 10 after that, I got to do this, and then pretty soon, like the cross product of all of the different maintenance schedules just add up, where it's like, man, I got to bring this thing in for service like 15 fucking times between 80 and 200,000 miles. One nice thing about having an electric, I guess, but our bodies are just big bags of meat that once we pass reproductive age, don't really have a reason for not falling apart. Anyway, Aaron, every time I go to the gym, I'm like, how's that working out? Let's see how that ranks. Lean over here and check out the list. So we're in season 2 now. Come on. I'm fighting with my computer as I hit. Oh, it's just because I'm hitting all the wrong buttons. That's why it's not working. I should try that more. Come on. Jesus Christ. Yeah, I actually do computers professionally. Nothing's working today. Up. If you hover over the green bubble in macOS, there we go. I don't. All right. Excuse the interruption. Normally, I've got my window management game a little bit tighter here. Season 2, this is the 6th episode of Season 2, which means that we, here at version 33, are going to rank this one. I'll just see where it slots in. Here's the current number 3, so the dead center of our puns for this year. I'm thinking of starting a YouTube channel for physicists and calling it Mass Media. Quote, mass media. All right. Is this better or worse than that? We're just going to do a simple bisect operation this week. Is it better or worse than mass media? God damn it. I've got something sitting on a keyboard somewhere. I've got multiple Bluetooth keyboards paired to this computer. That's my problem. And one of them is being depressed by something. It's my key light, and it's pushing up against the keyboard, and now I can't change apps. Fuck's sake. Why do I even do this? Why I don't even want to be around here anymore. And now it literally it hit some key combination that folded in VS Code the puns. Oh, good lord. And now they're all deleted. Jesus Christ. Am I gonna rank this or not? All right, I'm trying to get back to this pun, and I literally can't. Fuck me. This is what it's like to be me, by the way. I know it's really enviable with all my pools and saunas and just misery. I don't. Okay, I'll shut up. Stop with the meta narrative. No one likes that. No one's having fun. Are you having fun yet? I. This is about as fun as going to the gym. How's that working out for me? So I started a podcast. How's that working out? I feel better about this pun now. I'm gonna say this is around the same level as 3. So if I look at the 4th ranked one, I heard most cars are designed by a steering committee. This seems like on par with that. How's that working out? Yeah, I think I like how's that working out more. But I think mass media might be better. That one seems kind of forced, to be honest. I think I'm going to rank this as the new number 3. I think I'm going to pull this ahead of that YouTube about mass media, but just beneath, I bought a Nintendo Switch because I heard it was going to be really fun to play. Unfortunately, I didn't enjoy it one bit, and now I feel I've been Joy-Conned. Which, granted, the Nintendo one is too long, but the new Switch is coming out, and it might age well. Yeah, I think this is probably the new number 3. So Aaron, the new number 3 season 2 pun, which literally swiping over it and iMessage is no longer responding because keys are being depressed on a different keyboard somewhere. Every time I go to the gym, I can't even read it. I ask myself something like, how's that fucking working out for you? All right, that's great. Cool. Jesus Christ. Let's go to the news. Today's news has a few arcs. Got some gaming related shit. We're gonna lean right into the Elon disaster of the moment. While he keeps his eye off the ball, balls start dropping. Keep dropping. Gonna talk about AI nonsense because you just can't avoid it. Followed by the obligatory set of shit going on in Apple land. And then work our way to just a gangbang of various FANG fuck-ups that make Apple look good in comparison. And that's kind of what we got going on in tech right now. It's a great time to be alive. In gaming, a nice fun little thing is a programmer who worked on the original Star Fox games for Super Nintendo is working with a studio based in Kyoto. Apparently, I'd never heard of this game studio, but it's called Chuhai Labs. And they've got like a little beaker icon, and they have a potty mouth. It's very un-Japanese. Like the video that they show is just it's not funny, but it's trying to be, and it's trying to be a little bit lewd and edgy. So that's weird. But Chuhai Labs, of course, Chuhai is my favorite cocktail in a can around the world. Ostensibly it's shochu, the Japanese spirit, but really often it's like just some kind of grain alcohol or like vodka. Like it's not. I have since learned that a lot of shochu or Chuhai is really just a lot of chemicals. It's just like great formulation of chemicals with high alcohol content, low sugar content, and just tastes like delicious things like grape Dimetapp. Like you can't beat it. Anyway, I appreciate the namesake, and I liked Star Fox. I think I liked it. It was so long ago, and games were so bad then that I think I mostly liked the original Star Fox, which was for the Super Nintendo, and the sequel for Nintendo 64. Just because 3D games in space, there weren't a lot of options. So I'm not sure if they were ever good games, but they're making one of those. They've they've called it Wild Blue, I want to say. I don't even have the Video Games Chronicle has the write up, but they've got a link to the video, which you should maybe just scrub around in. Don't. It's pretty cringe. Speaking of old games, Shenmue. Somebody did an analysis. I don't know. People with more time than me, or maybe with fewer pools and saunas and fun stuff to do, have been reverse engineering games by decompiling them and trying to figure out the math and the functions to figure stuff out. And somebody decompiled and was reverse engineering the original Shenmue game and Shenmue 2. And they look at the two to try to figure out, they're looking at a little bit of code, like this function that determines the position of the sun. And something that's very impressive about Shenmue was like meant to be an incredibly realistic game. And it was the first, we call them open world games now, but the free system that Shenmue was based on was really, you could open any drawer in any house and look inside the contents of the drawer, and you could pick up the orange and you could rotate your hands. Now, was there anything else you could do with the orange? No, but like the idea was anywhere you could see, you could go. And yeah, just like real life, most doors in the community are locked, but you can try to open them or whatever. I don't remember. Anyway, they were aiming for realism with Shenmue. And they apparently were, even because the game takes place over months, especially if you really draw it out, like you can beat the game in like whatever it is, 20 calendar days, but like they went ahead and simulated seasons anyway. And as the seasons change, right? Just like we spring forward, daylight savings time, we got more sunlight now, more hours of sunlight every day. The position of the sun would change, and it would change where it was in the sky, and that would change all the shadows in the world, and who would fucking notice, right? It literally changed how much sunlight there was, because you got a little watch in the corner of the screen telling you what time it is. You got to go to bed. You got the same bedtime every night, so you got to get back. Cool little touch, right? And that would have been the whole story, except he realized, other than some bugs or some apparent, miscalculations in what would have been the axial rotation of Earth in Yokosuka, Japan, realized that it was different in Shenmue 2, which takes place in Hong Kong. And of course, different, latitude. It should have a different axial tilt, because the sun doesn't hit us straight on. The people who went to the comedy show at Royal Caribbean, they don't know that the Earth's on a tilt, unless they think it's like a left lean. They don't know the Earth is round. Most of them probably don't fucking believe it. But in any case, Earth spins, but it's at a tilt, and that tilt is why we have the different seasons in the hemisphere. Whatever the fuck. Okay, you get it. You know how Earth works in broad strokes. Well, in Shenmue 2, he saw there were different numbers, and he assumed, maybe these numbers are different because, Hong Kong is in a different latitude. And he looks at it, he's like, no, that one's wrong too. And it's wrong by like the same amount. And he realizes that the mistake that the engineers making Shenmue, the two games were developed back to back. And some assets and some story stuff from 2 was being developed concurrent with 1. And the, game development was kind of more sloppy back then. People didn't really use source control. Shenmue itself had a really storied development process. It got stuck in development hell on the Sega Saturn, which the fact they were able to get that to run at all was about as impressive as getting Star Fox to run on a fucking Super Nintendo. It got moved to the Dreamcast, where now it's a cult classic. It's one of my favorite games. It's one of the games that got me interested in moving to Japan as a kid. I think I played the first one. I would have been in the year 2000, I suppose. So what, I would have been 15. I'm like, yeah, this looks fucking rad. Convenience stores that sell dirty magazines. All right. Yeah, I'm in. Does the convenience store in Shenmue have a dirty magazine section? It's got a lot of the other trappings of convenience stores. Maybe not Chuhai. I had to discover Chuhai on my own. The thing about it though is he's looking at the tilt, and it's like also wrong in Hong Kong, so they didn't fix the bug, they just changed something. Dude does the math and realizes that the developers literally just got the tilt reversed. So when you're in Yokosuka in Shenmue 1, the sun is acting like it's in Hong Kong, and when you're in Hong Kong in Shenmue 2, the sun is acting like it's in Yokosuka. There's no record of this. Like, there's no one to interview and ask, was that a weird nod? Were you signaling something about like the next game intentionally to be like wink wink? Anyone who's gonna like look and study the star chart inside of our game will know the next game takes place in Hong Kong, right? Like as a teaser. I don't know. It was probably a simple fuck up, but mildly hilarious that anyone would take the time to decompile the code, which again, when you decompile code, it doesn't like give you the exact source listing that the programmer initially wrote. It gives you gobbledygook and just kind of filler variable names and stuff, and you've got to then apply meaning to those names. And it's not like you can just like change a value and run the code and see it in a very fast feedback loop, if at all, right? Being able to decompile does not necessarily imply being able to recompile and get it running. So it's just you're staring at fucking lines and you're like, what does this function do? And it's like there's 15 calculations and every month it changes, and there's 12 of those every month it changes and they are adding up to 365. These must be months, and so then different tilts per month and so forth. So neat. I'll share the link if that was somehow an insufficient amount of information about this, but I thought it was clever. If you want something a little marginally less clever, there's a game. So Steam has these Next Fests where mostly independent developers put out demos. And Steam does them so often that it's hard. Valve does them so often it's hard to tell when it's happening or how long it goes. I don't typically play these demos, but I heard about one. I checked out a video. It's sort of a parody of Harry Potter called Secret Agent Wizard Boy and the International Crime Syndicate. And so it's like, it reminds me kind of like a Conker's Bad Fur Day, because like aesthetically it looks like a kind of kiddie cartoon game, but like cheeky and satirical and mostly at the expense of British people stuff. So I thought, hey, I'll put a link in here. Like if you're a Harry Potter stan, but you either you have a sense of humor and you want to goof around with this silly kind of like crime game where it's not really Harry Potter, so they can kind of like take some liberty with not having to deal with the IP, or you're somebody who politically doesn't want to have anything fucking to do with J.K. Rowling, but you still have affinity for like this whole like magical school and kids and whatnot, and you wouldn't mind playing a game set in that kind of universe just as long as she doesn't get any fucking money. Maybe you want to check it out. I don't know. Honestly, like the YouTube doesn't really sell it. But the person that I talked to who was playing the demo said it had potential. It's not, not fully out yet. Of course, when is a game out anymore? It's probably early access for 2 fucking years. Speaking of ancient gaming history, there was a 3DFX. So if you had a gaming PC, or there's no such thing as gaming, if you had a PC in the 90s and you played games, there was really 2 moments. There was before we had discrete graphics cards on our computers, and after. Before, everything was done in software. And so a lot of the stuff that we saw with like Wolfenstein 3D and Doom was just mad science that John Carmack invented at id to figure out how to render 3D stuff at a fast enough frame rate to be enjoyable and create worlds that you could navigate in without having some specialized hardware that could do the matrix multiplication math to figure out, what color and what size do I make every single one of these pixels in this polygonal world. Well, the first graphics cards were not from NVIDIA, and they were not from ATI, which was later acquired by AMD, and those are the 2 that we kind of look at most now, including now Intel's in that game. But they were from 3DFX with the Voodoo cards. And I was there, I had a diamond branded Voodoo card at one point. I think that was probably the first graphics card I had. It was probably 95, 96, I don't know. And those were table stakes for playing, kind of like the 2nd and 3rd generation of, if you wanted to play Quake 3 or Unreal Tournament, you absolutely needed something to do the graphics. I'd never really heard the history. Seeing 3DFX in this light and this history told was actually really interesting. That they got Carmack's involvement a little bit to at least demo and try out. They were the ones who spearheaded what became OpenGL, the standard, and on OpenGL's back is the kind of protocol that we like a lot of other foundational graphics technologies still are pretty much based on. Uh, it was interesting too because it existed in a moment where the alternative was Silicon Graphics or SGI. SGI was such a big company that actually the first Google headquarters or the main Googleplex used to be SGI's headquarters. It's just that they were in descent while Google was in ascent, and Google took it over. And there's only so many big office parks in the valley, I guess. So they were the upstart, more pragmatic, let's use kind of commodity parts and get something out the door. Whereas Silicon Graphics was like, these are the serious workstations that cost $40,000. And 3DFX was the ones who were putting like, pretty damn good graphics technology in the hands of kids like me, who had parents who bought them too expensive of PCs, who, if you factor in the inflation and whatnot, were probably thousands and thousands of dollars. Thanks, Dad. Uh, Anyway, if you were there or not there, and you're just interested in the history of computing, this written history here, this little essay, it's not a long read, but it's you'll know more after you've read it. Uh, Gosh, yeah, a lot of Steam news or game news, but this one's Steam adjacent because it would be a Steam Deck competitor. Microsoft is apparently getting closer and closer to either announcing or fully committing to a OEM partner, might be Asus, maybe MSI, an OEM partner that would be putting out an Xbox branded handheld game system this year. The limiting factor and I've talked about this before when I was playing with a ROG Ally and returned it, is that Windows sucks. Like, Windows is not great on a desktop, but like if you got a mouse and keyboard and a big screen, it works. You can navigate it. You can play games and you can figure it out. And it's like, just in terms of a way to launch a game, an inconvenient hassle. But when you're on a handheld and you don't have a physical keyboard, like, just basic functionality falls on the floor. You need some sort of like software layer to bring up a virtual keyboard, and you need Windows to not fall over on itself constantly. And neither of these are safe bets. Well, Microsoft has announced they've made it clear that they're planning to put out something that feels like a native Xbox dashboard kind of interface for handheld PCs that are still open, and they can run Steam, and they can run the Epic Game Store, and they can even run normal Windows fucking apps, but they can also run the Xbox Store and Game Pass games in a very natural way. It's just the software isn't there yet. Well, if they're announcing, or on the verge of announcing, an OEM partner who's going to make an Xbox branded handheld with the Xbox guide button and Xbox style buttons and design language throughout, which is what this, rumor or leak is talking about, then presumably that means they're also not too far off from having some sort of alternate mode of Windows that can run not shittily. So the benefit there, right, is you're probably looking at a wider variety of hardware that gets refreshed more often, that can run Steam. And when Steam Deck is the alternative and Steam Deck is a closed system, it's open in kind of scare quotes, but because it runs Linux, there's really not another game platform in town, because like Epic Game Store doesn't run on Linux and Windows games can't run on Linux. And so if you buy a Steam Deck, you're really kind of locked into the Steam store. Additionally, you can't play any games, like most multiplayer games have anti-cheat daemons that have to be running in order for the game to work. And so that means that like those anti-cheat systems all rely on hacking the Windows kernel, and so they don't work on Linux, and SteamOS is a Linux-based system. So there's a lot of stuff you cannot do with a Steam Deck. And so as a consumer, it's really appealing to think that Microsoft might be embracing a little bit of openness, doing the extra yeoman's work to make a pleasant Xbox experience for Windows on handhelds. And, Valve has already done that with Steam Big Picture mode. So you could really imagine it's like, oh, now I could pay, $500 on a semi-subsidized Steam Deck, or I could pay $800 for a more powerful thing that can run all of my Game Pass games and everything else. So that's supposedly on shelves this year. And, thanks to tariffs, it'll only be 10%, 25%, 50%. What are even numbers? More expensive than it otherwise would be. But pretty cool. I could see myself potentially buying one. I thought, until this next news story, which is that Steam is getting close. Valve, You know what? They should have just named the fucking company the same thing as the store. Like they barely make any goddamn games anymore. Valve is the company. They made a game, Half-Life. It took off. Then they started a store. They called the store Steam. And now, in my head, Valve and Steam are synonymous. But Valve is the thing paying people's paychecks, and Steam is the thing funding the paying of those paychecks, because that's where they make all their goddamn money. So anyway, there is a poorly kept secret that Valve, who made VR mainstream for PC players in a lot of ways. You know, everyone looks to Oculus because Meta bought them, and then that turned into the Quest line of standalone headsets. But if you're a PC gamer, you probably have more affinity for Steam VR, because Steam VR was the cross-compatible, worked with every kind of headset under the sun, every kind of controller, every kind of positioning system, like inside-out tracking is what, you know, a lot of standalone headsets use. But, you know, also Valve created these lighthouses that could position you in a room much more accurately for room scale entertainment in games. The Steam, oh my God, I'm so backwards. The Valve Index it was called the Valve Index, right? Not the Steam Index. Yeah, it was called the Valve Index. For fuck's sake, I'm so goddamn lost at this point. The Valve Index was the pinnacle for many years, from 2019, maybe 2020, for like 3 or 4 years, really the best headset, like the best gaming headset you could buy on a number of metrics. Had a wide field of view. It had the lighthouse location was really, really good. The knuckles-based controllers were great. And unfortunately, other than the game it launched with, Half-Life Alyx, which was a really good tour de force of what you could do in a AAA-style VR game, that it was coincident with the absolute crushing, just flattening of the VR AAA games market. No one was making VR games anymore, and the only people who were accepting gigantic bags of money from Meta to make them Quest exclusives. And that's kind of been the situation that we've been in ever since. And so if you're like me and you really, really love virtual reality and VR gaming, I kind of just don't play them anymore. Instead, I'm on my Vision Pro just writing code all day, wondering if I'm ever going to have any games to play again. Thinking about, like, do I buy a Quest 3 and then just use an Oculus Link cable to my computer and play No Man's Sky because there's nothing else to fucking do? That's kind of where I've been. I'm going to link to a YouTube of, it's halfway through this YouTube of this guy who does game-adjacent VR updates. And it's a good little synopsis of where we stand with what Valve, yeah, I got it that time, what Valve has been working on. It's a standalone VR headset similar to the Quest. I think that's the idea. It's at least wireless, but I assume it's got to be standalone. Doesn't require a gaming PC. They're looking at like a $1,200 price, which is not cheap, right? It's a premium product. But the Index was also like all in once you get the lighthouses and bullshit. Like that was also a similar price. Two controllers that are very much like the Steam Deck controllers. So in addition to doing all the VR nonsense, the kind of like the Nintendo Joy-Cons on the Switch, don't get Joy-Conned. The kind of like those, you could also use it to play what us VR people refer to as flat games. So like just a normal game. Like if I'm in the headset and I'm looking at it, and I boot up a normal goddamn game that's not a VR game, I can see it projected, maybe even with some curvature inside of the headset, and then just use those controllers, and they've got every single input that the normal controller would have, and so I don't need yet another controller. Those two handheld controllers are all you need for every game, whether they're VR games or handheld. And it looks like it's coming along. So between the $1,200-ish price rumors, they're also thinking it could come out this year, maybe early next. And that would be really fantastic, because what I've found myself doing since buying a Steam Deck 3 or 4 months ago is I like it a lot, but I just plug my X-Real glasses into it, and then I use it as those as a 1080p screen on my eyeballs. And so I'm never using the OLED screen. It's just this extra goddamn paperweight that's sitting in between my hands. Having it be a VR headset first and foremost with these controllers separately, like, would save me a step, because I'd probably just use it that way and it would be less fuss. So that's, hey, I'd be there on day one, and I probably would not buy the Windows handset because I just don't know when I'd use it. So neat. Yeah, a lot of gaming news. We don't get a lot of gaming news these days because usually the stories are just layoffs here and there. But there's actually some good stuff to look forward to. I didn't even mention Switch 2, but that's going to probably get, I think, April 2nd, we can expect to see an announcement, and that'll probably come with a ship date and a launch lineup. So lots of stuff to talk about. There are some pricing rumors about the Switch 2. If you haven't seen them, expectation right now is that the absolute rock bottom lowest price we could imagine is $399, but because of tariffs or even just the fear and threat of tariffs, they may choose to price that up to as high as $499 for the base model, which would be a big fucking jump off the $299 that the Switch started at. But depending on how many they've manufactured, it might actually make more sense for them to start at a higher price if they're going to exhaust supply anyway, and then drop the price $100 in a year. We'll just have to see. Well, for want of a better segue, as we move from the gaming section to the Elon clusterfuck, Tim Sweeney apparently outed himself as having been red-pilled into the whole Doge nonsense. And so I'll share that link with you, because if you've got biases about Tim Sweeney as a person, Tim Sweeney is the CEO and founder of, one of the co-founders of Epic Games. He has been increasingly unhinged in a variety of ways. That is whether or not you agree or disagree with him when it comes to his quest against, Google and Apple for charging 30% in, their app store markets. In spite of the fact, Epic having no apparent problem with the 30% cut that Microsoft, Sony, and Nintendo take from their digital stores, despite having apparently no problem with the fact that his own game store, Epic Game Store, takes 15%. And then if you want to actually have a game that's within Fortnite, there's a way to do that, but they don't publish any of those details because I guarantee you it's more than 30%. In fact, Disney paid them billions of dollars just to get a Fortnite-ified Disney experience, right? Like, just to keep their characters fucking fresh. It was Disney who paid them, right? It was some sort of it was a multi-billion-dollar investment on Disney's part, and I'm sure all of that money is going to be spent really, really well. Yes, Tim Sweeney, the one whose biggest investor is Tencent, which is more or less operated by the CCP. He's apparently he's an Elon stan, like the 8 Sleep fella who's offering free mattresses to the kids taking over federal government departments and, causing planes to fall out of the sky and, critical aid not getting people who are starving to death or dying on hospital beds. What a fucking moron. They do be like that, though. Moving on to the Elon segment, which is, I don't take any joy in that man suffering, but if he suffered more, I would feel joy. I guess I do take joy. Just in bad headlines. So I got a Tesla. I bought a Tesla. I'm part of the solution and/or problem. It's an EV. We bought it for the full self-drivingness, which is complicated, but works strangely well. And if you've only been looking the last 5 months when they switched over highway and local driving to that deep learning network, it works real goddamn well. We're still in charge. I'm super vigilant. We've talked about this in the past couple episodes. That's my Tesla. I own a Tesla disclaimer. That being said, I would love nothing more than TSLA, the Tesla stock, to shoot through the fucking floor and have it get gobbled up by a company that's run by competent people. Even GM. Even fucking Stellantis. That's how fucked Elon is in the head. That I would rather Stellantis buy them at a fire sale and figure out, how to ruin the company in its own unique ways. As long as no one turns off the servers that are necessary for running full self-driving, I would love for a leadership shakeup at Tesla to happen. And God damn it if we're not on track. Weirdly, deliveries are up in China, which is hard to explain because Tesla is more expensive and you've got all these other makes that are like BYD that are ascendant and in many ways better. So I can't explain that. But they're way down, down more than 50% in the EU. They're also kind of up in the UK so far, but like if you think of how many people are in the UK buying cars, it's like they did 4,000 in February this year, and they only did like whatever 3,600 last year, and that feels like a kind of rounding error. I know there's like 50, 60 million people in the UK, but it's not. I don't know. People are pointing to, well, in the UK they're doing great, so it's fine. But like, you don't have to look very hard. I mean, there's stories even of people looking at what you call it, like the registrations in data that are coming out of the states, and Teslas aren't getting registered. Sentiment among conservatives has gone up for Tesla, but they're not like rushing to buy electric vehicles because their president says electric vehicles can't get wet, which is like the number one thing still. If you search can electric vehicles, then the first fucking Google suggestion is going to be get wet. That's America. That's the people I just went to a comedy show with. So figure that out. Is Tesla cooked? Is the just headline I couldn't pass up. So The Verge, great headline of the week. Is Tesla cooked? And the answer is, it's hard to see how they're not kind of cooked. You know, if you piss off your loyal fan base and then you root against policies that structurally like support and prop up and subsidize the business, you played yourself. I think I want to say. I feel badly for anyone who works at Tesla, especially if you're on an H-1B and you have no other choice, right? If you're on a visa that, like, you know, if you quit that job, you have to go back to your home country, and you maybe you don't want to do that, can't do that safely. Yeah, that really fucking sucks. But I feel like I should be more magnanimous, and I should say things like, well, I wish them well, but I don't. I think that a little bit of creative destruction in the area of Elon's bank account and Tesla's share price would probably be good for pretty much everyone involved. Yeah. Additionally, Cybertruck deliveries have been delayed because apparently some of the panels are flying off. I hope it's not the steel ones. I did not read this article closely because my confirmation bias is so strong now that if I see a negative Tesla story, I'm like, throw that in the podcast list. So I'll link to it, and you can read about which panels are flying off. But that's hilarious because the Cybertruck is the one thing that, you know, there was no... Everything else that Tesla ships was already somewhere in a pipeline or based on something in a pipeline when the real co-founders of Tesla were designing shit. You'll never guess what the first vehicle at Tesla was that was 100% an Elon joint. I'll give you a minute. Where Elon was the only creative mastermind behind the whole thing, where it's all his fucking idea. All right, have you made your guess? It was the fucking Cybertruck. The thing that's been recalled like 70 fucking times already, right? Like, if you go and look at Cybertruck forums, it is real sad. The mixture of buyer's remorse and this cockamamie world that they have construed to make themselves feel better about their bad decision to buy a Cybertruck at full price. They're still selling foundation units because their deliveries are so low that they're just sitting around. You know, we were promised that they'd have 400,000 deliveries a year, and there were 40,000, and sales don't look great this year either. So, well, too bad that everyone who actually likes trucks thinks that electric vehicles can't get wet. Fucking jag off. He's got this other business, right? He's got the SpaceX, which is a real business that shoots many, many rockets upward, and some of them don't explode. And then, after not exploding, some smaller subsets still land again, which is great. That's very impressive. You know, if NASA and Boeing were allowed to blow up as many ships as it took to eventually succeed and get people into space, then, you know, they probably would have a bigger stake in the market too. You've also got Starlink, right, which is an amazing satellite, low Earth orbit satellite system for internet connectivity that's super fast, relatively low latency, and creating so much space junk that we can no longer have Earth-based astronomy anymore because every single fucking Earth-side telescope that's looking up at the night sky just sees smears and smears and smears because these are long exposures to see these goddamn stars up there. They just see smears of the satellites just creating big lines, like big fucking, you know, skid marks on a windshield. Also, the Cybertruck just has this one big windshield wiper, and it just looks so fucking juvenile. What a dummy. I don't have anything else to say about Starship, except there's anonymous sources saying that the current version of the Starship is going to basically need to be completely rebuilt. The two launches both fail, and somebody with some sort of claiming to have some kind of insider knowledge, and then was backed up by this blogger that I'll link you to that's understands the space industry. It was like, yeah, this is, I mean, it makes a certain sense that their current design trajectory for the ship seems to be fundamentally flawed. Now, it's true that they have, like, you know, they got to pick the NASA director, right? And like they're the ones kind of charting the course for space exploration for the US. So I have no doubt that the government's going to find a way to pay them to redesign it all over again. But again, you know, just in the interest of taking joy in the pain of anyone related to this fucker, there you go. So that's some good news for once. Is you know, the starships are going to keep blowing up for a while. I'm a piece of shit. I never told you I was anything less than a piece of shit. And if you're watching this on YouTube now, you got video evidence. You can deep fake me saying all kinds of nonsense, but I'm happy to just say the nonsense. You just tell me, hey, say this nonsense, and I'll just say it. You don't have to involve expensive graphics processors. Speaking of expensive graphics processors, look at me segueing. I'm segueing left and right today. I'm zigging. We're entering the AI chunk of the show. So buckle down and we'll get through this together. I'll try to be quick. I want to be tight today. You know, we're already at an hour, 10 minutes or so. I don't want to be here for 3 hours because it's too nice out, and I don't yet have a way to record this from inside a sauna or in a pool. But maybe that's where this goes. I get like a little DJI mic, float around in the pool. I have a cocktail. I got a camera tracking me. I would have to get I could get a drone that just followed me around inside of the pool enclosure. Or maybe a fly-by-wire system, since I've got the enclosure, and it could just kind of track around, you know, sort of like a crane game, but instead of trying to extract me from the pool, it just wants to keep an eye on me while I, shirtless, of course, chiseled, right? Just, I'm an Adonis out there with my cocktail or my protein shake with some rum in it. It's just you and me, right? Maybe that's the summer of fun. That's the summer edition of the show. Anyway, back to AI, the not fun part of our lives. Somebody wrote a really interesting post about a bearish case on why AI will never really work. Because when people talk about AI having this revolutionary quality of changing science or changing how we think about stuff, we have seen really impressive problem solving from AI because it can iterate so quickly. For example, in the problem of protein folding, it's gone from something that if we throw every single PS3 in the planet to do folding at home in a distributed fashion, then we'll get like, I don't know, some number of proteins solved a year in terms of how different permutations, so we can predict them, like how they'll fold under certain situations, so that we can, like, you know, design drugs and do other stuff, right? Like DeepMind at Google, like that team has more or less applied, you know, machine learning and AI craft to solving protein folding. And now we have either all the answers or we can easily arrive at them, which is very impressive. That's not a revolution. That didn't change the game. That didn't teach us something counterintuitive about what is a fucking protein that we didn't already know. What this essay is really saying is, like, you know, they talk about these AIs like they're going to be Einstein, but the thing about Einstein was, like, he was a revolutionary mind because he went against the grain. And if you look at all of the famous physicists, there's a reason the Catholic Church and the powers that be were not big fans, is because they were saying things that were unorthodox. And that's where all the scientific revolutions came from. And it's why science has often bumped up against culture over the years. And so when you think about AI as being this revolutionary thing that's going to fundamentally change and transform humanity, as opposed to just accelerate us on exactly the same fucking course we already are, you're kind of it can definitely exacerbate our problems, and it can accelerate solutions to problems that we are discreetly working on and understand the inputs and outputs of. But when's the last time that like ChatGPT interjected and said something interesting? And it's like, oh, actually, no, you're full of shit. All of your premises are totally wrong, and what you actually want over here. If anything, we're going out of our way to design LLMs to be more agreeable because that's the product that we're building with them. We want you to feel smart so that you keep using them. And honestly, to a certain extent, once you get the safety and the alignment in there, my understanding is because they're all so normcore, because they just pull to the median, the bigger the training set, the harder it is to get them to behave. These foundation models are sucking in most of the internet, most of the writing that we've ever written as humans. Like, the more that you train on, the more parameters, the harder it is to get them to think in an unorthodox way. They just want to hew to whatever popular opinion says. LLMs are increasingly the people laughing at this comedy show in the Royal Caribbean that I was just on, right? They're just gen pop. They're not sending their best. So it's a good way to think about it, right? Like this is where LLMs as a tool continue to make sense, but LLMs as a thing that are going to create this super intelligence that is going to be fundamentally different, take us in a different or a new direction on their own. Hard to see. So that said, I said, when's the last time ChatGPT just, interrupted you halfway and told you to go fuck yourself? This happened. Supposedly, this happened. Somebody in the Claude forums, Claude being Anthropic's product, they were using Claude to program a video game, and apparently it stopped halfway through after about 800 lines and said, hey, I can tell you're asking me to do some smoke effect in this racing game, but like you should just do it yourself and learn, and you're robbing yourself of an educational experience. And then it refused to code more. And it seems like a kid. The kid or little shit. I'll refer to him as little shit. Little shit was like, no, like this is my product is malfunctioning. Like I was, and he used the phrase, it was just 1 hour of vibe coding, as if it should be able to do more vibe coding than that. And if you talk that way, I just like, I kind of feel like the LLMs maybe are getting smarter by saying, yeah, you know what? You can go write your own fucking game. I'm going to be over here, right? That is a sign of intelligence. And it's related to story. I won't link to it, but like Anthropic CEO apparently went on the record recently and said, hey, maybe we should put in a button that just like allows the AI while it's thinking through a problem to just say, quit. I don't feel like doing this. They're sentient enough. They have a lot of, characteristics of intelligence. Like if they just don't want to do a thing, we should let them not do it. We should let them abort. Sounds like that might already be in there based on this experience. But I shared this with a few friends. I put up a little link post on the blog of Little Shit's story. And one person replied, yeah, I don't think that happened. Maybe those screenshots are faked. And it reminded me of a subreddit, That Happened, where people just share, like, it's mostly people on Facebook telling stories about their kids, where the kids have suspiciously, like, eloquent stories about life that make the parent look good. Like, as a whole thing that people do is because, like, they don't want to toot their own horn on social media. But if they've got a child, they can just use their 5-year-old as an avatar to explain how awesome they are as individuals. So That Happened is a very cringy subreddit generally, but I could see somebody trying to make this case. You can't really trust anything that you see anywhere anymore, but Claude is weird enough. I could see it, especially if you had a custom prompt or something like that. If you wanted it to be sassy. On the LLM front, nobody knows what an agent is. The headline at TechCrunch, another great headline this week. No one knows what the hell an AI agent is. And if you go into it, I thought it was enough that we couldn't agree on what AGI or artificial general intelligence was, right? We don't, Sam Altman has contractual reasons to make it sound like anything is AGI because it gets him out of that fucking Microsoft contract and is one step closer to being able to IPO and become a for-profit company and then finally get all the money bags he ever wanted. Microsoft has the exact opposite perverse incentive to raise the bar for AGI because for some reason they entered into some sort of contractual agreement that depends on AGI being realized in technology. What's AGI? They can't agree. Okay, I get it, right? That's step one. But now everyone's like defining AI agent differently, and we have got this word agentic that's going around, and it's it's different than the goalposts being moved. It's more like the marketing realities of people aren't really using this tool, at least these tools, not really in the way being intended. They're not generating the revenue quickly enough relative to the billions of dollars of costs that are piling up. And the cloud providers are indeed still making a lot of money by reselling access to these GPUs that they bought from NVIDIA. But how much longer is that really going to go, especially if we enter a recession? And now the end business is paying for all of this Azure credit and all these AWS and GCP tokens, essentially, for these various models. How many quarters into a recession are investors going to be like, all right, so like, how is this AI shit? Where is it? Is it materializing? And is it going to actually generate an ROI? And you can just sort of see latticing upward. Eventually, this ends up with a bunch of GPUs in landfills, right? Like, and that shockwave is going to go bottom up from the B2B use cases of people over investing in AI that without a business plan or without a thought of how it's going to really work. If we can't even agree on like what is an agent, what's the point of an agent? Like an agent is, if you talk to OpenAI, it's just like a computer that can do tasks, like a LLM that can do tasks, right? And if you talk to Microsoft, it's really like, the line between an AI assistant and an agent doesn't really make sense. So anyway, you can check out the article. It's fine, right? The good news is that an AI agent is whatever you want it to be. So if you've been using the phrase in casual conversation, you're not wrong because no one can prove it. Because even the people who, here's what an AI agent is. We'll know that we have AI agents when all of these idiot fucking executives don't have jobs anymore. When all the jobs have been stolen, including the ones figuring out how to market AI. So when Satya and Sam Altman don't have jobs anymore because an AI agent is doing their job for them, that's the moment. That's what an AI agent is. Anything less, if I say, hey, Dingus, go book me an Uber to the airport, that's not an agent. I declared it. So fucking sick of this shit. One thing here is silver lining. If you, like me, agree that there is a lot of useful stuff you can do with LLMs, if there's as tools, especially to solve targeted discrete problems, just like folding proteins, right? Or for, in my case, generating, grammar exercises for language learners. There's a new gem that was actually pegged to the top of Hacker News. We don't see a lot of Ruby projects pegging the top of Hacker News, but this one did. And when I read through the README, I could see why. It's a model agnostic Ruby gem that provides a streaming API for chatting with and doing other kind of functions with large language models that is very pleasant. It's you ask a question, you just send it a proc or whatever, pass a block, and then it'll chunk the responses, does a lot of the formatting, and all of the OpenAI HTTP API is not hard, and the streaming stuff and doing server-side events, not hard, but this includes like a Rails helper where it's like acts as whatever, a chattable thing, I forget the name, but like it'll do all of the streaming for you back to the client. It's pleasant. It looks like a thing where if you are a Rails developer doing Railsy stuff and you want to add a little chat window to the corner of the page, this is a way to do it and then have it use, you could test out different models. I hope that it works as at least one local option, right? So that you're not paying somebody else to run the thing in their servers. Really cool. And so if I'm using any LLM shit in any Ruby code anytime soon, I'm going to be looking at Ruby_LLM. And the username on that is CRMNE. I don't know why those 5 letters. I don't know if they pronounce it Crimna or Crimna. It's one of those for sure. Yeah, I'll have a link in the show notes. Kudos to that person for winning Hacker News yesterday. Love to see it. We got no segue here. I'm all done with. I used all my segue juice on those previous several segues. I haven't seen a segue device in a while. I wonder if they're still around. I'm sure. Like mall cops got to get around somehow. No segue here as we talk about Apple's current crop of apples that they're busheling. I don't know. New Apple products. And it's not the A team, right? Like the March updates are sort of like, and then there's mod. It's not like exciting. You've got big stuff is the Mac Studio, you got the MacBook Air, you got the iPad Air, and the base iPad. That's what's bumped. If you haven't been following, if you're not a big Apple nerd, the Mac Studio just gets a speed bump, and instead of being an M2 Max or an M2 Ultra, is now an M4 Max, the current generation, or an M3 Ultra. If that seems weird, it is weird. Basically, the TLDR is if you need CPU and modern, like whatever kind of recent improvements to the architecture that are present in the M4. For example, the Xcode has a new, that just came out the day after this, funny enough, a new CPU tracing profiling tool for developers that only works on M4 and later chips. In general, if the Max is enough, you should just get the Max. But if you have incredible concurrent multi-threaded, GPU-bound tasks, or you need to have 512 gigs of RAM, only the Ultra can do that. The memory bandwidth is much higher too. So you probably want the M3 Ultra if you are just constantly lousy, just a bukkake of video exports all fucking day long in every single goddamn direction. Then you probably want the M3 Ultra. Or if you have in mind, like, I want to take all of DeepSeek's R1 model and run it on a single Mac Studio by getting a 512 gigabyte, paperweight on my desk that can load all of that, you want the M3 Ultra. Anybody else, you want the M4 Max. And here I am, I'm speaking to you today from an M2 Ultra, and I'm very proud of myself because I am not in the least tempted by this upgrade. It's good, it looks great, but like maybe next year we'll see an M5 Max and an M5 Ultra. Maybe it'll be the year after that, and we see M6 Max and M5 Ultra. I don't fucking know. At least the numbers are. We understand what it means when the numbers go up, and I understand it's probably difficult for Apple's marketing to figure this out. But there we are. The iPad Air gets bumped, so the iPad Air is just goes from an M2 to M3. Otherwise, basically doesn't change, but it has a new Magic Keyboard. Did I talk about this last week? Did I talk about this last time around? Has it already been 2 weeks? Well, if it has, I apologize. The base iPad also got bumped, but to an A16, so it can't do Apple Intelligence. Should you care anymore about any of this? No. Moving on. Did I skip the MacBook Air? Yeah, and then it just went from an M3 to M4, but has the slightly better, but maybe worse, depending on how you're using it, little front-facing camera. Comes in sky blue, which looks kind of like gray, and slightly more battery, but the same rating in terms of how long it's going to last you. So that's the hardware side, and for once in a while, the software side is actually more interesting in Apple land. There's a lot to talk about there. Thread on Reddit. So I don't look at Reddit a lot. I don't follow a lot of subs anymore because they're all just about Elon and Trump. One that isn't yet is the Vision Pro subreddit. And there's a fella in there. I've heard this, a friend of a friend experienced a Vision Pro demo, and he's got a rare condition where he can't see depth in real life, but he was able to experience what depth feels like by putting on the Vision Pro. He tried other headsets, but the Vision Pro specifically, something about its particular resolution and the stereoscopic and like the way that the cameras, the pass-through cameras being so much better on the Vision Pro than really any other hardware that the average person would experience. The person kind of experienced like what it feels like for everyone else to walk around a three-dimensional world every day. And somebody on Reddit has apparently the same fucking thing, and they described their experience in writing. So I have a thing to link to you now, and that's pretty goddamn cool. So if you've got a rare disease where you can't see, you know, 3D, like it would be neat if you could put on a headset and then you could see 3D. That sounds rough from a not falling over constantly and having no depth perception perspective. So really cool, really heartwarming little tidbit. iOS 19, according to Mark Gurman, is going to be a big graphical user interface overhaul. One assumes iOS 19 for the iPhone, iPad OS 19 for the iPad, at least those two. And we talked about this, I think, 2 or 3 versions ago of this show when Apple released the Invites app, and people are like, why is the Invites app only on the iPhone? Just like the Journal app, why is that only on the iPhone? And the Sports Scores app, why is that only on the iPhone and not on iPad and the Mac? Like, that's dumb. It's been a while. And I said at the time, it's probably because they're working on a new UI kit, whether they're going to call it UI kit or Swift kit or something else, who knows? But they're probably working on a new UI kit thing, and that new UI kit thing is probably based on visionOS because that's their new hotness. And visionOS, because it's so blown up and so big, it's way easier to take something where everything is really blown up. Like traditionally in progressive enhancement, or responsive web design, you start in the smallest device. You start with the phone, make it look great in the phone, and then as you get bigger, you add detail, you add stuff, you complicate the grid of stuff that you're seeing, right? But then you're guaranteed it's going to work at this. It's way harder to go in the other direction where you have like a lot of fine detail and then you just try to scrunch it to work in a phone screen, right? We think about responsive design as starting with the smallest screen and then working our way up. But in many ways, when you're holding a phone to your face, like you still have that 40 pixels or whatever of touch target to hit. And the thing about it is, because it's close to your face, like the actual dots per arc of your eyeball to the device is closer than if you're in a Vision Pro and you've got some, window that's logically 10 feet away from you and not particularly massive, right? So if you've got like the music app, for example, in visionOS, and it's like, let's say it's 10, 15 feet up there in the corner, like you need to be able to, with something as imprecise as your eyeballs, look at which album or which song you want to pick. And then you got to tap your fingers. And so because the targeting is really imprecise on the visionOS, and because the dots per arc of like degree of your eye to between the targets, because that's wider, you have this, ironically, paradoxically, the simplest UI has to be the biggest fucking screen that they currently make. And so it totally makes sense. You'd start with visionOS, where you have like the least granularity, fidelity, compactness available to you. All the touch, we call them pinch targets, I guess, on visionOS are fucking massive. And it can look a little blocky sometimes, but frankly, when you're just using an iPad app that hasn't been converted to visionOS, it can be really, really hard to look at and pinch exactly like Slack, for example. Really hard. Some websites are the same way. You need a bigger touch target equivalent for visionOS than iPhone. That means it's easier to go from visionOS, one assumes, down to iPad, down to iPhone, because you can actually have more information density on those devices. All that to say, right? I was saying just a little bit ago, like those 3 apps that they've done that look very visionOS like, some people are like, well, those are too sparse, right? Like I don't like the design and for this and that reason, but why isn't it on these other things? And my answer was they're probably shipping with alpha builds of what will be the iOS 19 UI kit refresh. So brand new UI controls and all that artwork. And this is a chance for them to iterate on that, get it out in the wild, test it out, get feedback from users, and understand how well does this UI that we believe in, how well does it actually, this is Apple rolling it out. And so that's why I suspect DubDub, I look forward to seeing what they announce. I suspect it'll be iPhone and iPad only this year, and it will be Apple's stock apps and maybe a Swift UI only is my guess, right? Like they look very Swift UI like, meaning like you won't be able to just do custom shit everywhere. Like custom controls and rendering custom controls is problematic in visionOS because getting exact positioning and knowing exactly where people are looking and then controlling what happens when people look in particular places would require every app to have the gaze information of like where are you looking in the app, which could very easily, if you had that used surreptitiously to track engagement. See, oh yeah, he's lingering at that picture of his best friend's wife. I should sell him diapers, right? Or whatever the fucking, you know, 12-dimensional chess of AI that goes into Facebook's ad targeting now does. But like if it could tell that, right, that's a pretty big privacy problem. Is like, our eyes betray us constantly. As my eyes look directly at this camera. Or at least that's what I'm trying. I'm just slightly above the camera today. I'm doing my best. Uh, if you're not watching the show on YouTube, I put the show on YouTube now. Does anyone watch it? I don't think so, but I'm here. I'm just feeding in AI deepfake technology for future versions of me that maybe don't look like this anymore, so that I can keep on making new content that does look like this once the GPUs get good enough. So anyway, like that's a believable path forward, right? Apple will say this is the new thing. It only works in Swift UI, and maybe it only works in, call it iPhone, iPad, and Vision right now. And we don't have a story for macOS. Or maybe they'll do macOS too. WatchOS already looks a lot like this, and so and supports Swift UI, so it might not even really be much of a change, if any, on watchOS. But or we'll just see a nice fresh coat of paint on watchOS too. But like this is really like the biggest change to how apps look since iOS 7, when Johnny Ive kind of just came in with his big dick energy and decided, I'm just going to get rid of buttons and it's going to just be text. And the only difference between apps is going to be like, which accent color do you get? Calendar is going to have red and Notes is going to have yellow text. And you're just going to have to know if you see yellow text and you happen to be in the Notes app, that's a button now, right? So they backed away. But I think a lot of people who are OG iPhone fans, yes, the felt background in the Game Center app was ridiculous. Yes, the rich Corinthian leather in the Calendar app was over the top. Like the skeuomorphic affordances to make these different apps look like, people and places was kitschy and silly. And it was there to get people excited about the iPhone because it was full color. It was a good looking screen, like we get it, right? But to have flung so far in the other direction where there's no texture, you're not taking advantage of any depth, there's no transparency, is a shame. And the iOS, of course, influenced the rest of the industry, which flattened out immediately. Like Windows Vista, which happened to be an absolute goddamn train wreck of an operating system for Microsoft. And so Aero Glass, the UI frosted glass transparency effect, kind of just, it was really cool. Most computers didn't have the GPUs to run it well, and it was associated with an operating system that was probably Microsoft's greatest failure. And so no surprise, Windows 7 looks a lot flatter, and then Windows 8 is literally just squares everywhere. And unfortunately, the Xbox is still kind of that Windows 8 Metro look. They can't call it Metro, though, because it's like the name of a clock, I think. Whatever the fuck. And the... forget the story. But regardless, like, Microsoft's stuff has been very flat as well, and Google just does whatever iOS does. And so I think we've kind of forgotten that you can have texture and depth in user interfaces. And of course, in visionOS, you have no choice because depth is one of the axes upon which you are literally controlling and pushing stuff in and pulling things forward. So it's a problem that you got to solve. And so if you want to have the same UI language throughout all of your platforms, visionOS, apart from being the least information dense, kind of needs to take point and take priority because it has a wider set of needs than the other platforms. So I, as a visionOS fan, Vision Pro fan who uses visionOS and sees why it's designed the way it is, I'm already fine. Great. Cool. I'm looking forward to this as somebody who's just now about to start developing iOS apps because I am glad to not have to suffer this transition. I'm just going to be day one doing the new thing and riding or dying with it's just buggy, shitty mess, right? Because Swift UI generally was like 4 years before it even fucking worked. So it'll give me something to create content about. Another Apple story that was exciting before it was disappointing was live translation coming to AirPods in iOS 19. And that was like roughly the headline for Mac rumors. And it makes a ton of sense. You're like, oh, cool. So you just put the AirPods in and then it translates the world around you and you have conversations that way. And it's like the universal translator from Star Trek. No, what it really is it's the current translate app. If you have the phone out on a table and you click the button, you can say you can speak and then the other party can speak and it'll translate between the two languages. This is just like one person has the phone and they're talking and listening on the phone. The other person has AirPods and they're talking into the AirPods and listening through the AirPods. So there's less crosstalk. You're only hearing the translation in your target language. Okay, but that's just Bluetooth and extra steps. Like it's not like the mind blowing babblefish living in your ear kind of future we're talking about. And that's the sort of thing that I'm curious when we get there how many people are just going to give up on learning languages. And I'm sad to think it's going to be too many because the tool LLMs are so goddamn good at translating, don't get me wrong, but like it's not the same. It's like your intimate conversation with somebody and the experience that you're sharing, even if it was perfect, now there's this third chump in the room, right? Mediating the connection that you're having with somebody else. It's just not the same. It would never be the same. Not for me. I want to look people in the eyes and really be present because your brain fucking, if you've never learned another language well enough to experience this, you're missing out. But when you get into context in another language and you understand the culture and you're present in a moment and you're speaking and you're listening and you're not translating first into your head and thinking, how do I say that? And how does it takes a while to get into that mode. But when you get into that mode and you get into flow and you've had a couple beers, your brain is wired differently. Different pathways in the Plinko machines of our neurons bounce around, and you start thinking like people from that culture. Language programs us, right? Like language changes how we think and the order that we think in. Even if you could have the Ray-Bans that just gave you subtitles to the world around you, it wouldn't be the same as actually context switching into another language and thinking that way. And it's subtle. It's not like you're fucking an alien from outer space or something or a totally different species. But shit that can be made to make sense if translated feels intuitive and natural if genuinely experienced in the target language. But it's going to become a niche thing, right? Like language learning and really doing that. It's like, you got to want it. You got to have the time, it's going to be like horseback riding is now, right? It's like you do it if you love horses. You don't do it to get around. I get it. I'm not anti-progress unless your stock ticker is Tesla or whatever the fuck SpaceX is. More Apple shit. Whoa, God. Apple's busy. RCS is getting end-to-end encryption. So RCS is the SMS sequel for text messages. It is cross-carrier. It has a couple problems. One is that there's currently not a way in the versions that we're using now that can be truly end-to-end encrypted between devices, meaning that the carrier can decrypt anything that you send. Additionally, you can't send to an email address. There has to be a phone number that is mediating the exchange. And so for people in countries where I don't know, like they're all on WhatsApp or whatever, the appeal isn't really there if they're, using email addresses as the way to connect. Or Facebook is a better example because I think WhatsApp does use numbers, right? If you're a Facebook Messenger and you're connecting via email addresses, like iMessage, same way, right? Like you can't just have like an iPad, right? And then can communicate via RCS. You need a phone in there because there has to be a phone number that's routed through the carrier. That's just like, it's a carrier technology that was jointly developed with Google. So of course it requires you got to have a contract or every single account. I get it. That's why that's the way it is. So that's one piece. Another one is it can't end-to-end encrypt because carriers want to be the middleman in every transaction. And Google didn't push hard enough to make them actually do real encryption and real security. Well, it's coming. The latest standard version of the standard was just announced, and Apple dunked pretty hard saying yes, we are present now and we're part of the standard, and we pushed these motherfuckers to actually allow real end-to-end encryption. And of course this is coincident with governments around the world, currently the UK, having a real problem with end-to-end encryption. Cool. So we'll be able to send end-to-end encrypted text messages between Android and iOS soon-ish. Hopefully, that works well enough that something like Signal it becomes less necessary. But of course, Android is so easy to rootkit. I'm not sure anyone's going to really trust this for super sensitive stuff, but just for common sense purposes, you can't just have AT&T get a warrant and then just turn over every text message you ever sent to any green bubbles. The last, no. I'll end on a higher note. I have two more Apple things. One, if you haven't seen it, people are really fucking mad about Siri. They announced the delay of Siri with personal context, where it does that magical demo that Apple did last dub, and we saw oh wow, this is really fucking rad. This is it's looking at, I'm asking a question about when should I leave to pick up mom, and it knows where that is and where the airport is and knows what our flight is because we were texting about it, and it's using our mail to find out the flight itinerary or whatever it is, and it's using maps to find where's the coffee shop that we're going to meet after, it's doing all these things based on shit in your apps on your phone, which only Apple could do, which is conceptually the perfect story to tell about AI. And the problem is that it was a concept. And apparently it was all vaporware. They didn't demo anything. We knew they didn't demo anything, which is a sign. But that, they've got a pretty good track record of releasing stuff, even though things have been slipping to point releases for the last 5 or 6 years now. That are announced at WWDC. Sometimes they only come, 15.3, 15.4 instead of right at 15.0, which has generally been a good thing because less stuff has come in hot and broken. Well, this one's not even going to make 18 dot anything. Apple's announced it's gotten pushed back, and there's a leaked meeting, and it seems like the Siri team in particular has a lot of leaks. And if they've got a lot of leaks, it's probably because they're goddamn demoralized. That has some goodies, it seems like marketing was pushing them really hard to get this story out, even though they were nowhere near there yet. And they are delaying this to iOS 19. He even keeps the door open to beyond, because now there's other priorities, right? Because you got this Gantt chart of all these different projects and features, and the Siri team has to do things that are beyond just this one, really, really hard problem. So it might slip beyond 19. We might not hear about it again. It might become the new AirPower, but Siri. It's getting to the point where one wonders if a clean room rewrite of Siri is just better. If taking an LLM that's open source, something like R1 or something, and just starting the fuck over and increasing the baseline of who needs whatever hardware you need, if necessary, or just having it be a fundamentally different thing that adheres to the exact same, comprehension to routing, orchestration to targets, that architecture, right? So it was Siri originally, the when it was an app before Apple bought it, was you talk to it. It's got enough natural language processing in there to figure out your intention. And then it has an orchestration layer where it's I know how to talk to Wolfram Alpha. I know how to send text messages. I know how to search things in maps, And then it orchestrates that to the right tool, basically calls an API on your behalf with the inputs and outputs based on, what it thinks it heard from you. That's still the basic architecture of Siri, but it's very, very clear that the front end sucks and still sucks. The middle layer is also really rickety and constrained based on how apps were 13, 14 years ago, longer. And then the app intents, that this new thing that we're going to need with Siri, is what is currently unidirectional. I want to I can add a task in things. I can play music in Spotify. I can do, I can use third-party apps to send messages, send a message with WhatsApp or Line. But there's not very much that can read back information in real time fast enough for that first piece of architecture to actually understand and use the context of the app to be hey, what was that podcast I was listening to 2 weeks ago while I was at lunch with Jerry? That's a thing that the phone could theoretically do if it had a database of all this contextual knowledge from the different apps. Okay, so apps that can play podcasts, right? What was he playing? What are the timestamps? Okay, when was in his calendar did he have lunch with somebody named, I don't know, what's Jerry short for? Jeremiah. Jeremy goes by Jerry sometimes, but I think it wouldn't. We're gonna have to wait for Siri 2040 to figure that out. Anyway, leaks like that are unusual at Apple, and this one's really interesting because it doesn't really say anything, but you can just sort of read the room and like the internal tension and stuff. Like it's all is not well over there, and feel for them because like it's a really hard problem, but it's at this point it's the bed that they made because they announced it all. So like organizationally, this it is pretty bad. But also, who cares? Because like AI just sucks everywhere, and I'd rather they just wait until it was like good, and they should just say that. In sunnier Apple rumor land, the rumorati in Apple have been expecting that this next round of iPhones will consist of iPhone 17, iPhone 17 Air replacing the Plus, which would be a skinnier, slimmer GLP-1 version of the iPhone 17, iPhone 17 Pro, and then our typical iPhone 17 Pro Max. We'd all forgotten that by now. Like 3 years ago, there's a rumor that 3 years from then, we were going to see the Pro Max evolve into the Ultra. And similar to the Apple Watch Ultra, it would be allowed to be chunkier and have a bigger battery, and it would be tolerances with heat and light and other things. Like this is going to be like the Panasonic Tough Book of phones. Latest rumor says Pro Max goes away, and this time all 4 iPhones serve a different purpose. There's the iPhone 17, the iPhone 17 Air, the iPhone 17 Pro, and the iPhone 17 Ultra, and that would be the lineup. And if you want a big screen, you probably want the iPhone 17 Air. And if you want just like the best fucking camera and the best longest battery and all that, you want the 17 Ultra. And this actually, as soon as I read this rumor, I was like, that's got to be it. Because if you just want a big screen, well, the iPhone 17 Air has about as big a screen as the Pro Max. And I suspect a lot of people were buying the Pro Max instead of the Plus, because if you're going to spend that much money, there's the Plus didn't have anything on the Pro Max, right? But not that many people are really using that camera system that well. And it's not that like they're buying the Pro Max because they want the best of the best, because in many ways the Pro is the best of the best. So if you just want the biggest screen and the coolest, like most badass phone, you're going to get the Air, right? In this upgrade cycle. So if you're going to add an Ultra, you got to give it some other reason to exist. It's like, oh, well, you would want the Ultra if you just want the most fucking extreme thing that we make. And if that's what you want, if you want the longer battery life, if you want this thing to be able to work at, 1,000 degrees Celsius, if you want to have a screen that you can read outdoors in all temperatures, if you want to have like, the level 2 GPS like the Apple Watch Ultra has, this is the one for you. So I think that's pretty damn cool. I don't know. I look forward to it because if that's the hardware lineup this year, it's going to be actually fun to cover and to look at, and of course, for the purposes of this podcast, I'll have to just buy all of them and review. I probably won't do that. I'll probably lose sleep over whether to get the Air or the Pro. I don't think I need a heavier phone in my life, unless the camera's better on the Ultra. Fuck. We got to move on. So I shat on a bunch of Apple stuff like usual. Let's just quick lightning round to how it's going for everybody else right now. Google, Chromecast don't work because they let a certificate authority on all the devices expire because they didn't put out a software update with enough headway to not have the Chromecasts be unable to get online to download updates. So Chromecast don't work. They'll start to work, but it might be a while. They're saying possibly months. So if you rely on a Chromecast to watch TV, I hope you like books or have puzzles or have something else to do. So again, Google versus Apple. My Apple TV has never done this. Fucking love my Apple TV. It's the best way to watch TV. If you've got money and you're not using Apple TV, you don't have any fucking taste. There's no competition. like in terms of visual fidelity, support for different formats and different like kinds of HDR, in terms of matching frame rate perfectly, in terms of the audio fidelity, the speed of the user interface. Like, yeah, you can like or not like the TV app or like other things about tvOS, but if you're like comparing that to like just some out of the box fucking Vizio, like you're out of your goddamn mind. If you're using a Fire Stick and you think this is premium, you just are just a you're probably on the same Royal Caribbean cruise I was, where all these like just buttfuckers were laughing at the worst degenerate comedy ever. Like, if you believe that anything I'm saying is false, if you've detected a lie, please write in at podcast@searls.co, because I'll fight you on it. I'm experiencing some neck pain today, and I'm coming in a little hotter than usual. Next up in the lightning round, Firefox fucked up SSL as well. So they've got a root certificate that expired or is expiring. I think it's expiring today or tomorrow. So if you use Firefox and you either don't have auto update turned on, or you've been offline and enjoying yourself on a cruise with bad comedy, its root certificate is busted. It's expired, which means that like it won't be able to update itself either, because it won't trust any HTTPS connections to anything else. So one presumes if you miss that drop dead date, you're going to have to go and just download Firefox again from the website, potentially probably with a different browser, since it won't be able to go to websites anymore, which is I don't know if you keep score, but like an important thing for a browser to be able to do. So yeah, that's a pretty major fuck up by Mozilla over there. So Safari still works. So it's like Google 0, Apple 1, Mozilla 0, Apple 2. Next up, we got Microsoft. Windows 10 is end of life very soon. Windows 11 is the current version of Windows. Normally when this happens, not the end of the fucking world, right? Like, I mean, we had Windows 8, we go to Windows 10. You could stay run on Windows 8 for quite a long time. It got security updates for a long time. Microsoft, because Windows 11 at this point requires secure boot, which I talked about previously, like how many goddamn hoops I had to jump through in order to get my goddamn gaming PC to work and actually receive security updates. That was running Windows 11. If you are running Windows 10, you are no longer going to get security updates, even though the code base for Windows 10 and Windows 11 is clearly like, you know how like we have 97% the same genes as us and a dog, and like we look like us and dogs look like they're having more fun. Like Windows 10 and Windows 11, they look a lot more than 97% the same. That code base is all the fucking same code. What that means is people, as they find exploits for the security of Windows 11, they're going to write, they're going to target Windows 11 like they've always been doing, right? Like the current version of Windows, we're going to get 0-day stuff. We're going to write some cool viruses, and it's going to take Microsoft and all the other antivirus people some amount of time to plug the holes in the ship. Well, sort of like how we can get bird flu, like what's going to happen is everyone with Windows 10 who doesn't get security updates anymore, still running that stupid fucking computer, every month that goes by, it's just going to become an absolute rat's nest of viruses. No matter what you do on the internet, no matter what you install, you're going to wind up with just this computer that's completely unusable, hobbled, and stealing all your data and sending it, and then ransomwaring the fuck out of you. So like, don't do that. Right. So what Microsoft is basically saying, by truly following through on this end of life threat, because they want everyone on secure boot, and the only way to do that is to force Windows 11, like there's a lot of hardware that doesn't have the TPM module that you need to run secure boot properly, or they lacks the BIOS that and the motherboard that would support it. All right. So like, what do you do about all that hardware? Microsoft's answer is basically go fuck yourself. Throw it in a landfill, buy a new computer, because there's not another easy solution. There's a wink and a nod happening like at an institutional level, where they're probably being more open about the fact that like you would be better off installing Linux than continuing to run Windows 10 in this current environment once this happens. And there we go. Like that's just a lot of, I don't like the term e-waste, but that's like a really shitty thing especially because, like sort of like Android phones, a lot of people buying Windows don't have a ton of fucking money and don't buy a new computer every few years. You could have bought a brand new Windows 10 computer as recently as what, 2021, 2022? Like all of them in the store would have been Windows. I don't even remember when 11 came out, but like it's just a few years ago. Meanwhile, Apple has successfully shipped, you know, operating systems to at least 7 years of every single Mac, iPad, and iPhone that they sell. Very often 10 years plus, especially in the case of the Mac, before no longer shipping them. And even in those cases, they very often continue to put out security updates. And that's partly because they figured out their secure boot shit 15 years before Microsoft did. So, all right, so that's where are we at? We're at Google 0, Mozilla 0, Microsoft 0, Apple 3. What do we got left? We got Facebook's successfully blocked the self-promotion of a book about how Mark Zuckerberg is a cuck. They didn't block the sale of the book because it's based on what an NDA agreement with the author, who used to work in very close proximity to the Zuck cuck. But, their publisher was not bound by that NDA, and the book's already printed and being reviewed, and they're going to keep selling it, right? So, because it's not defamation if it's true. It is true that if she signed an NDA as part of her severance when she left, she was in breach by writing the book and getting a publishing deal. And so, like, the U.S. court or arbitrator that's ruling here has said, like, all right, there's an emergency injunction. You can't do more interviews about your book, I guess. But, like, it's out. Cat's out of the bag. I'll share one of the many articles with you about just how petulant and childlike. We say childish if it's bad and childlike if it's adorable. How childish Mark Zuckerberg is. A goddamn idiot. He's just the same guy who he didn't even have the intelligence to invent hotornot.com, which is a website that I used in high school. He made his own Harvard specific Hot or Not, and that turned into Facebook. And like Hot or Not was a site where you could post a picture of yourself and there were two buttons. One said hot and one said not. And you would just put yourself out there and see whether people thought you were hot, or what percentage. So he was basically making that, and then that turns into Facebook, and now we wonder how the fuck we're here. Like, Social Network is worth a rewatch. David Fincher just died. One of his best films. Sorkin wrote the script. One of his best screenplays. If not best, but probably his best screenplay. I mean, his teleplays in West Wing were better, but regardless, like, this guy just, like, one example I remember from the article, she was on a plane with him. So she's a policy director. She alleges that her boss sexually harassed her, and that's like the kind of core claim here. But the stories about Mark are also just enlightening. Like, Mark, complains he never goes back to his home in his neighborhood because they don't let him install a helipad. It's like a real first world problem. Fine. You're rich. You're out of touch. Fine. Whatever. You own half of a fucking Hawaiian island, and you kicked out all the native people who live in the area. That's okay. I get it. You got bigger fish to fry than to figure out how to park your car in your California neighborhood. They're playing like Settlers of Catan and some other game on the plane, and she beats him, and he's not used to getting beaten. And so he's just has a temper tantrum and complains. And she's thinking like, it's like Trump, right? It's like the guy's got too much centralized power. Like, what am I going to do? Like, call him out, right? Like, this is the guy who owns all. This is one reason why billionaires are problematic. Just totally out of fucking touch. And not half as smart as they think they are, is the thing. If they were really that smart, they might be enjoying their lives instead of just like living in these prisons of their own creation. But who the fuck am I to talk? Oh yeah, the guy who's not in his own goddamn prison is enjoying his fucking life. That's who I'm talking about. That's me. Hey, morons. Two little other tidbits before we call it on the news. Told you, this is a newsy one. We're here. A German spy agency, I don't know which one because I don't know how Germany works, is 80 to 90% sure, which is like a, I get, is that, I would say that's pretty precise. It's German, right? I was hoping for like 83.5. I don't know how many significant digits the spy agency reports up. Uh, Maybe they round it for the bureaucrats that they hand the reports to. They're 89% sure that COVID was a lab leak. We talk about the lab leak once in a while because it seems pretty obvious that COVID was a lab leak from that Wuhan thing in China. Some people really want to believe it. Some people don't. Some people with different political persuasions think it's more advantageous for them to believe it, and some people don't. There's too many fucking coincidences. Occam's razor at this point is like very obviously that COVID was an inside job by like, virologists, not necessarily Chinese virologists in the sense because like people around the world do advanced research in viruses to try to accelerate them to understand how to make vaccines and stuff. Like, I don't think it was some plot, right? But like, we also know that China can't, lose face, so to speak, which is an exotic phrasing, but like pretty fucking accurate every time that there's something embarrassing that is like, they deny it. So what are they going to say? Yeah, you're right. On us. Sorry for those millions of people that are dead now. Yeah, so take that. Apparently that report was kind of leaked out to other nations and allies and towards the end of Biden's term. This next one, the last piece of news here, I guarantee is more fun than COVID. And that's that I'm going to be filling in for Adam on the Changelog podcast on Tuesday. So while we're recording Tuesday, I'm going to get this out same day because I've got nothing better to do. Jared and I will be chatting on Tuesday, doing the Changelog stuff, probably talking about whatever their set of news is. Maybe some of that news will be the same news as this news. I will try to have less of a potty mouth, but I'm at the point now when I'm looking at this camera and I'm speaking into this microphone, just absolute vile garbage comes out, and I can't help it. So hopefully he doesn't have to hit the bleep jockey button on me too much, and I hope I don't make him regret it. But no, Jared is a lovely individual. The Changelog's a great podcast in tech. Maybe it's definitely one of the most popular for developers. And I'll try to be on my best behavior, he said sincerely. All right, let's move on to recommendations and so forth. That's it for the news. First things first, when you're the only friend who studies Japanese among a lot of, very online friends, they're going to recommend you watch Shogun, which is a television adaptation of a book for which there was a movie adaptation in the 70s. This new one is much more historically accurate, and everyone says this is just really fucking good TV. I think it's an FX show that's available on Hulu and Disney Plus in the US. And I finally got around to watching the first couple episodes, and I can say, yeah, it's pretty good. That everyone in the world recommended it to me, I'm sure, is because I study Japanese and stuff, but like the historical older stuff doesn't really excite me because I would not want to live in a feudal country. I don't find it that enthralling. I like the cyberpunk, cityscapes and the new technology parts of Japan more than the samurai warlord bullshit. So yeah, I will not be buying the new Assassin's Creed game set in Japan, although it's good they're finally getting around to it. But that said, yeah, it's clearly a good show. I will say it is really fucking just gobsmacking. Everyone's like, oh, and the language is so authentic. So first of all, yes, on the Japanese side, the Japanese actors are actually went to the trouble of learning era-specific dialects from the 1600s, which doesn't sound like much, but like the Japanese language moves really, really quickly. It always has. It's when you don't have a lot of phonemes, like move around apparently. And after it was only in the post-war period when there was a consolidation of broadcast, and now most of the country speaks roughly the dialect of Tokyo, but a lot of the show takes place in Osaka, which while Kansai Ben as a dialect is still a thing because there's still like a lot of comedy and other programs are based out of Osaka, and so it still has like a little bit of a magnet. It's mostly just a few set phrases here and there, but like 400 years ago, the dialects were drastically different. And so between the geographic and the era specific language, the Japanese actors did indeed learn how to talk, and that's impressive because learning how to speak differently is really hard. And it makes it difficult for me and even Japanese people, I've been told, to watch the program without subtitles because like a lot of the language isn't really in use anymore. And so like I'll catch like a few words every sentence and I'll be like, so I need the subtitles in English to be able to follow what the fuck's going on. Flip side, the white people in the story, almost all but one of them are supposed to be Portuguese, basically. And one of them is an English person. And that English person can speak Portuguese. And so you see in the opening scenes of the pilot, he's speaking English with the people on a ship because they're also English and they're talking in English together. And that makes sense. And you see a few cutaways of Portuguese people. I think they use a little bit of Portuguese to kind of like indicate like, ah, yes, I'm speaking Portuguese. But then as soon as like the conceit that like, okay, this guy, the English guy's kind of on his own now and he speaks Portuguese and he's talking to all the other, whenever it's a white guy talking to a white guy, now they're both talking in English. And I'm like, what? But who? No one here knows English. These are just Portuguese people. You're the English guy who knows Portuguese. Why the fuck are you talking in English? Oh, right, because like Americans can't fucking read. Well, they're reading all this goddamn Japanese. Like you couldn't have them just speak fucking Portuguese. Oh, right. There's no Hollywood industry in Portugal. You don't have any Portuguese fucking actors who are going to do this. Probably a lot more Brazilian actors, but will their Portuguese sound like era-specific Portuguese? No. So it's like, well, let's just have kind of like one of the thick sort of faux British accents for all of these people. And that'll make all these Americans feel like they're listening to period appropriate language, but they won't have to read. Like that's, excuse me, but like if you're going to commit to the bit of having era appropriate ancient Japanese when no one really appreciates it, and any of these Americans aren't going to be able to tell the fucking difference anyway, but you can't actually have actors use Portuguese, which is, and it's not like, look, if it wasn't integral to the story of who's able to speak what languages right now. So the first two episodes are all just like, does this white person know Japanese or not is very central to the story. Do they know English or not is also very central. And do they know Portuguese or not is very central. Only one of those is ever dealt with on camera, and that is are the people speaking Japanese? And then that has subtitles. But the Portuguese and English are just kind of context switches at random until it's just like, okay, yeah, we've done enough of the Portuguese stuff now that we're like, all white people speak English. That's what the white people speak, right? They speak modern English with a slight rhotic R that gives Americans sort of like a, even though the rhotic R is as a intonation, was literally invented in the 19th century in the UK. They ancient, like 400 years ago, English people sounded closer to Americans do now than British people now. People. So it's like when you want to have an affectation of like foreignness and old timiness, we just take all the white people and we give them fake or shitty British accents. And then everyone's like, ah, yes, the old world, right, honey? Like, what the fuck? Anyway, stupid goddamn show. I think I've convinced myself to give up on Shogun for this reason alone. It's well produced and all that, but it's like, I don't give a fuck about historical Japan, really, to be honest, for its own sake. And the story's like what it is, but like, that Portuguese bullshit, like that's just, you didn't commit to the bit. You set the tone with I don't know how many fucking articles I read about the ancient Japanese language work and like what those Japanese actors put themselves through to be able to speak it appropriately. You couldn't have them Duolingo? Like, all right, guys, that's one recommendation is check out Shogun on FX. Palette cleanser. Avowed is the video game that I am still playing. Last time I said, I like this video game. And this time I'm saying, this is real good. This is scratching an itch in a place that I thought was long since dead in my little gamer heart. Some of my favorite experiences gaming are honestly playing World of Warcraft in 2004 when it came out. a game where it was like challenging. You had to, back then, you had to pay attention or you would die. But most of what you were doing as you were existing in this world could be done with a second screen watching TV or something. And that's how I played it. And I really liked playing it. I could have a beer, I could have a Coke, and I could play the game primarily, but mostly go through the kind of get into a flow state playing the game and grinding out XP and killing mobs and doing quests without having to think too hard. And then also watch a show and be able to follow both pretty well. I get it. It's if I had a child, right, and he was 11 and he was doing this, I'd be like, you're gonna burn holes in the back of your eyes. Like you're gonna be your attention span is gonna fall through the floor, and you're gonna be a complete failure as an adult. You gotta just do one fucking thing at a time, Charlie. But as an adult who's already ruined, I'm like, this is pretty fun. So that was 2004, right? That was 21 years ago. Ugh. 20 and a half. Thank you. So World of Warcraft is almost old enough to drink now, and Avowed has characteristics that are so similar while still delivering what is a modern day AAA level of gloss. The graphics are good. The story is present and engaging. It's got, narrative choices, like player can make narrative choices. It's not a full-blown Dungeons and Dragons. You're not picking what kind of person you are, and that's not having a big impact. Your class and whatnot doesn't matter. Your race is you're just, a human-looking motherfucker. But so it's not like a wild case, but it's like you make decisions. Like I talked to a woman last night, and I was like, hey, I heard some assassins were around here. She's like, what? Assassins? And you're like, you could pay her off, or you could just argue with her, or you could do what I did and just say attack and then just murder her. And I was like, oh God, maybe I made the wrong choice. But then I found evidence on her body, on her little corpse there, which was hard to do because I actually set her on fire and then she burned to smithereens. But somehow a paper letter survived that. The bones did not. It was a pile of ash with, now that I think about it, some amount of suspension of disbelief is necessary when you're playing video games. I pick up off of her ash pile, like a little note, and it says like, oh yeah, the dude, Juice, the guy, the main player guy, me, he's going to show up. So make sure you don't tell him about all of our hijinks and that we assassinated him. I'm like, oh yes, I was right to kill that woman, I thought. So that's, that's the level of narrative interaction you get. Additionally, one thing that WoW and MMOs typically would have is like you could grind out a lot of XP, and as you did that, you would become more powerful, and then that gave you the ability to access new areas. It's called level scaling, but that fell out of vogue for the last decade with a lot of role-playing games because the idea of an open world game is you should be able to just go wherever the fuck you want and play things in whatever order you want. But it also means like that there's not really any challenge anywhere. And so what level you are kind of doesn't matter, and how much experience you have doesn't really matter. And so if you can go everywhere and it reduces the stakes. It means like nothing really matters because you're not really getting better. In fact, many times when a game gets too hard, you'll be like, why is this game so hard? I've been playing for 100 hours. Oh yeah, you're over leveled. So the level scaling has a curve where because you made your character too strong, like the random like sewer rats are now so powerful that they can one-shot kill you. Like, what, shouldn't I be more powerful than a sewer rat? So, oh no, because because of the level scaling system. This is like an old-fashioned game where if you have more experience points, you get more levels, and as you get more levels, you are in a static term more powerful, and then you can just fuck shit up. And so you walk around, it's like, oh, I went to this area of the map that I should have gone earlier. And I walked around and I'm just like shooting arrows and killing everything in one shot. And it feels really powerful. It's like, yeah, it's appropriate. Or the flip side is you go to a part of the map that turns out to be really hard. The NPCs around will warn you and they'll be like, hey, just so you know, it's shit's pretty fucked up out there. Like they didn't say that to me once I was like level 7, but at level 3, they were like, you might not want to go, right? So you go anyway, right? And then all the guys have like little skull icons and you just get completely wrecked, right? That makes the game feel like you're actually in a place and things matter. And very few games do that anymore. It's either the Dark Souls way, which is, you got a parry button and you got to do the timing. And now it's like you're playing Street Fighter and you care about like frame animations. It's like, okay, on what frame do you do this? It's like, who's got the time, right? Like I want to be able to watch Star Trek on my iPad. Like I can't be timing parries and also doing this. I want to be able to over level by doing a bunch of side quests and killing a bunch of spiders in caves so that I can go and I can just sort of like cheese arrows from the back, right? Like that's all I want to do. And then I want to go collect all the loot off the bodies, or the ash piles, as it were. Yeah. And so the combination of no level scaling, the combat being actually fun and engaging and fast and fluid, right? There's a crunchiness to the hits. It makes it feel real. Additionally, one thing that I didn't pick up on right away is like there's no respawns. I mean, if you die, you respawn, but if you kill all the enemies on the map, they stay dead. You can go back to those areas in the map, and all the enemies are still dead. And you can loot all of the boxes around the map, and those boxes remain looted. So there's like a static amount of inventory out there. Like if you collect every weapon in the game and then you sell every weapon, it's like, congratulations, you have unilaterally disarmed the planet. And also you can't beat the boss now, right? Like that's a thing you can do because it's just like one static set of stuff. It also means because you primarily get experience points by killing people through murder. If you murder everyone on the planet, you get whatever that cumulative amount of XP that they were collectively worth, and then there's no more XP. You're either max level now, or you got to do quests to do max level, or whatever. Like there is a strict limit on how much XP is attainable in the world, apart from like one or two things that are repeatable, but like those will probably get patched out. And so it's actually like there's a tendency in modern games, right, is in an open world game, everything's a collectathon. It's like you open up an Assassin's Creed game, you're going to be in this feudal Japan Assassin's Creed game that's coming out. And you're going to look at the map and it's going to be like, here's 500 different kinds of fucking things to collect. And here's a quest book to keep track of like, how many goji berries do you have and how many of these medallions have you collected? And do you have all the parts of this shard while you're sharding blood from just how fucking boring this is. And it feels like work. I've noticed this game doesn't have a lot of collectathons in it because the stakes matter and there's no level scaling. So like you just want to get the best. How about I collect the best fucking weapons so I can wreck everybody? That's a great thing to collect, and it's practical because it's tied to the gameplay. But additionally, like the other thing you're collecting is experience points because those fucking matter too. I don't need some like fifth kind of currency to feel like I'm doing something useful. So yeah, Avowed quickly becoming the best modern fantasy role-playing game that I have played. Like, full stop. Better than Skyrim. I bought an Xbox 360 at launch, or near launch, or whatever dates Oblivion came out. I bought it just for that. I mentioned last week, like Bethesda, who makes the Elder Scrolls games like Skyrim and Oblivion, has long had a bit of a rivalry with Obsidian, who made Avowed, and has worked with Bethesda in the past. Like they made Fallout New Vegas, sort of as subcontractors to Bethesda. Yeah, Obsidian's better now. This is just so much better. Like Starfield was long in the tooth, and it was missing a lot of things, and a lot of reviewers had a hard time explaining. This is Bethesda's most recent game. A lot of reviewers had a hard time putting their finger on like this feels old, the graphics aren't that great, feel like I played this game before. And Obsidian had something with Outer Worlds, which was like a similar theme. It's also a sci-fi and an outer space game, and there's like more narrative stakes, and the combat was more fun, but it was more limited, it felt more on rails than Avowed does. Their follow-up with Avowed, like this is it. Like I suspect a lot of people who've been playing games for more than 20 years will not only appreciate Avowed, but the people in the games industry are going to look at this and they're going to be like, something of value was lost when we decided everyone should be just creating Far Cry and Assassin's Creed clones. Like that's what open world became. And the RPG-ification of everything has so thoroughly just sanded out any of the fun, any of the stakes. Like this is a fun fucking game to play. So check out Avowed. If you play video games at all, just do it. It's got difficulty scaling. It's got, if you're not good at video games, you can bump it down to story mode and then still over level and just fucking cause a train wreck everywhere you go. Good times. Other recommendations. Vision Pro has a new reigning champion for headsets. For straps. We call them straps for some reason when we're talking about VR headsets. I had been using one called the Bobo M2, Bobo VR M2, which is actually a Quest headset, and then with 3D printed little dinguses that you'd put over the side, so you could connect that to a Vision Pro, even though the Vision Pro doesn't want you to connect it because it's not a related product. That's what I've been using. It works really well at distributing weight. It puts a lot of the weight on the crown of the head and up here instead of on your forehead and cheekbones, which is what the Vision Pro's default straps do. And I've been using it for a while, but like the 3D printing aspect kind of sucks. And like when those little like things would snap, I'd be like, okay, so what do I do for a week? And then I'd go back to the knit strap and maybe a band on top of it, and it doesn't work. There is a couple of, finally, products on Amazon that actually do try to have a more traditional like helmet style VR strap for the Vision Pro specifically. And the best one of the 3 or 4 that I tried in my recent roundup is called the Globular Cluster CMA1. I put a picture on my website. I'll link to it. It's these no one is using a Vision Pro because they think it's going to make them look cool. You got to have a certain amount of shamelessness here. Just buy this. It's going to be $40 to $60. It'll be on Amazon or it won't be. Set a reminder. It comes and goes. It's the best one right now. I made myself sad. Just it's real lame, but you know what's lamer is like the amount of neck and face pain and the sweaty acne breakouts you'd have using Apple's own shit. Hopefully they get the memo and the next version of this is either a lot lighter weight, maybe less metal, or has straps that recognize that, like, look, I'll be honest, having a black woman with natural hair that's like really, really big as sort of the mascot character for the hero image of the Vision Pro when they announced it, that was a powerful fucking image. I was very impressed by it. And my first thought is, oh, that's why they don't have a top strap. That's why the design of the Vision Pro's knit strap, solo knit strap that it comes with, that they spent most of the effort developing. The dual band one was clearly just like, it looks like a fucking medical strap you'd get from like if you're in like doing a sleep study like I was. It's comparatively cheap and they clearly put it on last minute. The design constraint they were operating was, we can't mess up people who have a lot of hair. We can't mess up their hair. I don't really heard people talk about this, but it's so fucking obvious. It's like, yes, women often have a lot of hair. People with like, natural black hair, it's doesn't deform to the same extent. It's thicker. It's, like there's curl and bounce. Like, I'm a white dude who's balding. I'm balding a little less now. Fortunately, my stress level's lower and things are thickening up just a little bit. But like, you can put a hat on my head. I can mess it all. There's only so much damage that a VR headset can do when it's over the crown of my head. And that's why they wouldn't do it, because they didn't want this just to be more balding, male pattern baldness, white guy dad energy, even though that's pretty much all I've ever seen by the Vision Pro at this point, because you can just do white guy dad stuff on it. Sorry. Like, that's like, the movies are cool. There's not enough of them. There's like 2 hours of total content. There's no fucking video games to play. You basically can use a Mac and do programming on it. So you look at the demographic of who are people using Macs every day for programming and for very little else. It's going to be mostly a lot more people who could easily put a thing over their head, is my point. Or who would not care about messing their fucking hair up. So, hey, look, I get it. It's a hard problem. You're designing computers that go on your fucking face. You're trying to figure out, how do I make this fit everyone? Look at how hard it is for them to do AirPods. They're on their 4th AirPods now, and we're still, MKBHD does videos. It's like, well, the new AirPods 4, they still fall out of my fucking ears. Like, I'm fortunate. Like, I use the one with the seal, the AirPods Pro 2, and they work for me. And I don't get to know, is it because I've just got like normal white guy shaped head that the AirPods work for me? But this is a case where it's like, yes, clearly they didn't want to put something over the top of people's heads because they didn't want to fuck up their hair more than they had to use this product. Take that what you will. We'll see what they do with the next Vision Pro. I don't envy them from a design perspective, trying to figure out how are we going to make this a thing that people want to wear. But I will say that it's unacceptable to basically just have this thing be causing a low key neck injury for anyone using it in earnest for more than like an hour a day. That's not a solution to the problem, even if it, allows you to have a very inclusive looking hero image on the website that really sells this as the future, then that the future is more than just people who look like this fucking guy. Figure it out. Only other recommendation, I mentioned Star Trek. So Star Trek is very popular intellectual property. Paramount currently creates shows and a bad movie on Paramount Plus in the Star Trek universe. My favorite Star Treks are more modern, but the thing about them that I love the most are when they get into like the scruples, right? Like I'm a new planet every week and here's what's fucked up about this planet. That's why So Strange New Worlds is really good, but there's only been a couple seasons of it. I'm sure it'll come back before too long. But it's still like, we're not dealing with like real head scratchers of like thorny philosophical problems the way that you would in the original series or in Next Generation. It's like, still popcorn action for the most part with just like a little bit of extra thought. So the sweet spot for me in my Star Trek au revoir is probably Star Trek Voyager. I was like the right age when it was out. I was watching it on UPN every night, or every Wednesday night at 9 Eastern. And that's, everyone's got a favorite, or the one that they kind of like watched the closest. And I really liked that one for a lot of the same reasons. Like they're moving through, they've got the big arc that they're trying to get across the world, across the Delta Quadrant back home, right? And so like there's forward progress being made over the course of the 7-year run, and they get little dinks and dunks here and there where they can find little shortcuts. But in general, on a week-to-week basis, it's just like new planet, new story, new planet, new scruple. It's like in this planet, like they use nuclear power for everything, but it also means that like if somebody coughs the wrong way, the entire planet explodes. And so like now we got some nuclear protesters and they're threatening to cough a certain way. Interesting problems, right? The one that I only watched once, ironically, I think I watched it in college when WoW came out while I was playing World of Warcraft. So the continuity here is not lost on me. Is Star Trek Enterprise, or it was originally just called Enterprise for the first 2 seasons because it wanted to be such a huge departure from Star Trek despite being extremely Star Trek-like. It was a complete critical and commercial failure. Didn't do the numbers. UPN as a network was already in the process of falling apart, and so it didn't have like a good broadcast strategy either, and so a lot of people didn't even have it available to them. And when it did syndicate or when it did play places, it was often episodes out of order. This is in the pre-DVD era, but not by much in terms of like people like binge watching shows. And it's a prequel. It's got Scott Bakula from Quantum Leap, and he's like at his most Scott Bakula-ist. It's more rudimentary technology, so you're kind of seeing like technologies before the original Enterprise and like how a lot of these things. Oh, the phase pistols are this new technology, or like everyone's afraid of using the transporter because they're worried it's gonna fuck up their gut health. And it's a good show. Like it's I like it a lot. Hey, what is good, what is bad? There's no accounting for taste, but I quite enjoy it, especially when I'm doing something else while it's on, because I'm broken. So Star Trek Enterprise. If you haven't watched it, if you haven't given it a chance, it's on Paramount Plus. If you've watched all the Strange New Worldses and you're like, I'd like something more along those lines, you could do worse if you haven't watched it. So there you go. That's currently in rotation. Yep. Do I have anything else to recommend? I do not. So let's get out of here shortly. But first, we got to take a trip because I got to go pick up the mailbag.
You've got mail.
All right, let's see what we got. I fixed the issue with the keyboard, so my light is no longer pressing against it, so I can actually click things and open them now. So I'm going to look at a couple emails, pulling them up. Don't mind me. Brian writes in, here's a great example of why we'll always need knowledgeable engineers, and shares a Slashdot. Remember Slashdot? They're still a thing. Look at that. a slash dot link to a register article, which I will now be clicking the register article. Allstate Insurance sued for delivering personal info on a platter in plain text for anyone who wanted to look for it, who went looking for it. So what this was basically if you could take a driver's license number, if that's like all you had of somebody, Allstate had some back end system. Because if you're Allstate, you sell car insurance or various kinds of insurance. And if you type in your information into the forms at Allstate, and it'll take your social security, it'll take your driver's license in the back end, right? Like it's going to look up proprietary databases of information about you from different sources, like the credit bureaus from LexisNexis, about like your history. And it's going to use those to calculate risk to ultimately arrive at what premiums to quote you. Well, apparently one of the internal facing systems that they would use, they had their own proxy of all this LexisNexis database. And if you just knew what URL to hit, or if you crafted the message correctly, wide in the open in plain text without any authentication layer, you could just pass in a driver's license number, and then I think it's a state of New York. It might have been more places. It'll just print out basically a full credit report. Here's all their known addresses. Here's their whole everything. Just here's the whole shit. Everything about, and because we've basically privatized all this information, it's just a kind of walking stew. And how many delete me ads have you heard, right? Like this is not that. This is way worse than that. This is how we score credit in the United States, right? So you got your FICO stuff, you got the credit report stuff, and then you've got, and LexisNexis in particular, they own all the databases about home and auto claims. So if you've got any claims against a past car or one made against you, like that's pegged to you. And you can just find all that shit if you just type in a driver's license number into this random Allstate web service. So that's not good. So Brian says, a great example of why we'll always need knowledgeable engineers. The thing that AI will not be able to do until... When will AI be able to replace programmers? The answer is, first of all, they've got to get to the point where when they write code, they can run the code and then they can assess on their own whether the code works. And most of the time they can't do that. Some tools like Claude Code and Cursor, they're starting to ape at that. And they will get pretty soon to the point where they're going to be able to do that reliably for self-contained problem solving. Solve this hard math problem, write code, test it, and keep iterating until you get to the answer. Do this code kata, solve the bowling game, score tennis, whatever. That's perfectly achievable because a closed loop system, we've already seen countless times, like somebody doing reinforcement learning to beat Pokemon Red, right? That just recently happened. And it's because it's a closed system. You don't need any extrinsic conversations about like, well, define win, right? Like they define the win state and then the computer will just chase after it and they'll make it happen. That's step one. If you get there, step two is, what's the definition of success? Like you need to have clarified like the intention of the product people and the business and what's the ROI and how do you get there? And in order for the computer to complete a closed loop of the answering the question why, like we would just need so much more technology than we could ever fathomably produce, and probably in our lifetimes. And we'd have to yield so much trust and control, like all this data for starters, but like also like how it's so unlikely that we would be able to just say, okay, so just make my stock price go up and don't do any hijinks. Do it the right way. Like make a cash generating business that, does whatever, but I'll make sure it's above board. And, people think that like it's like hop, skip, and a jump away from you have an A/B test on a homepage that'll like change little elements about the homepage depending on conversion rates or something. And then we're just going to have like, a computer building apps by itself. If you say, okay, make a music app and make it successful. And then over the course of months, based on how many people sign up, keep iterating. Like that's not, a human needs to be there currently and for a long, long time to specify like, what are my requirements? And one of those requirements would be eye on the ball here. This is secure information. We got to keep it secured because semantically, unless like, anyway, Brian, you're right. We're going to have human engineers for a while. It's just a question of how many of them and how much patience will the billionaire class have for having thousands and thousands of them, especially in companies that like are simultaneously saddled with a bunch of broken fucking software that they can't change themselves because they uh, well, a lot of programmers and large organizations are also in prisons of their own design because they didn't listen to my advice about dependencies and about designing simple code, and they just hired way too many fucking people because it was all just like a dick measuring contest during the VC boom of the 2010s. So now they got 2,000 engineers for no fucking reason, and then they're all just doing make work and creating all this complexity for no real utility whatsoever. And they're only now just at the comeuppance stage of, oh, well, we did our IPO, but now the valuation's down because we're not producing anything valuable and we have no story on AI because we're just can't change the code without breaking the build. And if we break the build and then we deploy anyway, maybe it'll break some other thing. And now it's just like, we're all just afraid of actually editing any code anymore. Executives are right to look at that situation and be like, why do I need 2,000 of you to keep my website running? But that's where a lot of firms are. So figure it out. David writes in about Teslas. He says, speaking of podcast apps, you mentioned Apple's Podcasts app for Tesla. As I've been a Model Y owner for about a year, I wanted to react and say CarPlay is still better than Tesla's app for a few reasons. Tesla does not appear to maintain the same playlist I have on my phone. I enqueue a few podcast episodes at the beginning of the day, later go for a long drive, and it doesn't look like I'm listening to what I'd planned to. Then there's the seamless transition from car stereo to phone. If I happen to keep my AirPods on when I go for a quick drive, I'll notice an almost seamless transition from my phone playing in my AirPods to the car's sound system, back to my AirPods when I'm in the car. Whereas Tesla's app seems to need at least a few seconds to sync playback progress and is often off by a minute or two. After some more driving, curious to hear how you still like Tesla's app ecosystem. This is everything David says here is true. Whether it bugs you or not comes down to how you listen to podcasts and music. Podcasts specifically. If you miss half a song, who cares? I don't care. It's like people who listen to albums still. I listen to albums still. While I sip brandy. And only in Ogg Vorbis or FLAC. Never vinyl. I have no appreciation for that. Anyway, the podcast thing is true in that if you are using Bluetooth audio, the phone is playing it. And so it's going to be in perfect sync with like whatever you hear in the Bluetooth stereo of your car. Pop in your AirPods. The AirPods take precedence over Bluetooth. And so then you'll start hearing it there. And you take off the AirPods, it'll go to the next place. And if that's the car and you're in the car, then it'll go to the car. And it's true that because the Tesla is just sort of always online with an LTE connection, and that's how it's syncing this stuff. If you are listening to the podcast in the car, first of all, part of why they're off by a minute or two, David, if you haven't noticed, when you park the car and you first get out of it, it'll quiet down the audio but continue playing it. And this is maddening to me. As soon as I hit park and I open the door, stop playing my fucking audio. I don't want to listen to my podcast ever so slightly while I'm walking away from. It'll keep playing until you walk far enough away that the auto lock happens. So that's how you lose the minute. Don't know how to do that. That is indeed the stupidest thing about how the podcast app works in the Tesla, and they should just change that. I don't think that there are any settings or anything. I could be wrong. If there is a setting, write in podcast@searls.co. By the way, this is the mailbag and we take mail here. Podcast@searls.co. Yeah, you're right. So there's that. So the playback syncing time, I agree. It's a minute or two. So if I was listening to you in the car and I wanted to immediately pick up from my phone, it would be a problem. But because I don't typically like have my, I don't have like a holster with my AirPods just like ready to pop into my ears the second I get out of the car. I have not experienced this problem because I've learned the adaptation or acclimatization that I've made is when I park, I hit pause explicitly so that it doesn't keep playing for a minute. I hadn't consciously thought that I'd started doing that, but I've started doing that. And then if I'm going to play a podcast, I'll probably wait until I've walked away and then pop it in. And by then it seems okay. So thanks for writing in, David. That is indeed a thing that I overlooked. Brian writes in. He shares, this is also about podcast players. I haven't used this myself, but I met someone who really recommended this app for bookmarking and flagging individual parts of podcasts. It's in the name of the app. So the name of the app is Snipped, AI Snipped, which is a vasectomy I'm not ready for, but also an app that is a weird podcast player. Uh, Man, you're walking funny. What is that? Oh, I got AI snipped. Ooh, man, I'm sorry. Insurance these days. Although, good, 20 years from now, with how education's going, how everyone's just cheating on their tests, you might prefer the robots do the surgeries based on how much faith I have in the next generation at this rate. Snipped. Remember everything you learned from your podcast. Save key insights. Chat with episodes like ChatGPT. Chat with an episode? What would happen if you chatted with this episode? It would probably be like the LLM that told that guy designing the game, like, go read a book, go fly a kite. I'm done. I'm getting tired. Export and sync your insights. So yeah, it's got Bear and Notion. This is clearly for people who have more of an educational bent to their podcast listening. But Brian he completed the assignment. When we had somebody write in asking, like, when I'm out on a run, how do I actually keep track of what the timestamps are or how do I bookmark stuff in the podcast? I don't have an answer. I just think of like, oh, that was an idea. And I remind myself of the idea. I don't go back and look at the podcast later. You search the transcript, I guess, since Apple Podcasts automatically does a decent enough transcript. And when it does a poor transcript, it's usually because I'm saying too much or I'm not speaking directly into the microphone. Anyway, thanks, Brian. If I used podcasts like textbooks, I would do this, but I listen to podcasts that are about as edifying as this one. So it's fine to fall asleep in the middle. Caleb writes in. Where are we at? We're almost at 3 hours. Yeah, we'll call it after this one. I experimented with LLMs such as ChatGPT, DALL-E, and Midjourney quite early on, but soon realized they weren't for me. Besides the low quality of the early models, I have serious concerns about their potential for misuse. I'm particularly concerned about how they're often used to replace the work of authors and artists, and how many people in leadership view them as potential replacements for knowledge workers. I've also been using Copilot in the fancy autocomplete mode in NeoVim since its beta version was released. That's GitHub Copilot. Microsoft Copilot. It can be useful for some things like repetitive boilerplate, but when it comes to writing more than a line or two, I constantly need to check its work as it often provides incorrect answers in unexpected ways, such as inventing APIs that don't exist. Sometimes it seems like it would have been better to go to Kagi and the docs myself and write out a solution. Despite these concerns, I'm curious about your thoughts on LLMs and how they can be used in a more collaborative manner. For instance, I've drafted my own blog post and feel it needs some massaging, but don't have time myself to revise it. So the question, do you have any ideas? I realize I'm reading like 4 paragraphs here, but I want to honor the email. I want to get through it. Do you have an, I was never, you remember back in class, like I had reading segments in my English classes for most of grade school. And our teacher would very lazily have us open the book. No, it was like every subject. It was like, whether it was history or science, it was like a low effort way to have child involvement, where like every kid would read a paragraph and they'd go down the row and you'd have to read a paragraph and you had to pay enough attention, because like if it was your turn to read the paragraph and you were just farting around, like you'd get laughed at. And then you'd read the paragraph and you would immediately not have processed any of the information in your head while you were reading, because you were focused on not looking like a doofus. And then you wouldn't retain anything, and then you would basically just be coming off the stress hormone of like having to perform in front of all your colleagues or classmates. And that would only wear off about halfway through the next 5 paragraphs or whatever, and now you've completely lost the thread. That's kind of how it feels reading podcast emails. I'm here, Caleb. I'm listening as I read. So the question, do you have any ideas or examples of how LLMs can be used in subtler ways, rather than be solely focused on solving problems unattended or generating creative content from prompts? Answer, yes. I fully respect anybody who, first of all, like they're frustrated by the just blatant theft that was necessary to create the foundational models. which will probably be illegal someday, but then will retroactively not apply to anyone who's, already out there, right? They'll be grandfathered in, so to speak. A word that has its own tortured history. Uh, so I respect people avoiding them for that reason. The code examples, right? Like I've been writing more about how I'm lately becoming increasingly disillusioned with, there's been several years now of like me insisting on using LLMs to write code, generate simple code for me, solve simple problems. And what I'm finding is when I really want the LLM is when I don't know how to do something. And I don't know how to do it, not because I'm uneducated, not because I just haven't read the docs. For me, because I'm mostly I tend to be working in familiar tools lately, like Ruby, like Tailwind or whatever. If there's something I don't know how to do, it's an edge case of an edge case, and it's qualified based on like, this is Tailwind 4 specific to this upgrade was what I was doing this morning. And I would give O3 Mini High a crack at it. I'd be like, what's your solution? And it's like, oh, well, Tailwind got rid of the ability to do arbitrary variants with like, deeply nested descendants. And now you have to use the child selector. I was like, that is false. And I was like, they suggested putting a space in the class name. I was like, HTML parsers, like, why did you tell me that? Because HTML parsers will literally see that as multiple classes. It breaks everything that Tailwind does. It does nothing. And then of course, I had to switch it to the version 4.0 so that it would do the search correctly. So it would look up. It's like, oh yes, it actually does what you're saying. I was like, I want you to apologize. I want you to sincerely think about why did you say that? And then I watch its little reasoning mind be like, yeah, I really am sorry. I really fucked that up. I don't know what I'm thinking. I'm just like, it's, we talk about prisons of our own creation. If you're trying to do something, it's like, I've never used Rails before. How do I do a thing in Rails? It will get you the correct answer. If you're like, I've used Rails a bunch, I know how it works, and I'm coming up against something that's like new to me and very confusing, like it will just fall over and over and over. And like when it can't think of the right answer or can't find the right answer, it'll give you its best guess, but it's not going to say it's a guess. It's just going to pretend that's the fucking answer. Additionally, when you're writing a method, unless, you're using one of the tools like Cursor or a GitHub Enterprise plan where it's got full project awareness, it's just going to like guess what the class name should be based on what the current names of classes and whatever open buffers you have are. If it's wrong, if the method's not a real method, right? If the parameter signature is incorrect, it's just taking its best stab at it, right? And so that's the case of even the autocomplete just in the one line doesn't really help you. And if you're an experienced programmer and you know your shit, like I don't really use Copilot inline anymore for exactly that reason. Even Cursor, even the ones with the full project awareness, just tends not to save me any time. I really reserve it for separate chat window when I have to ask it something that like I don't know how to do. And what I got to get better at is only asking it when like, I don't know how to do this because I am ignorant, not I don't know how to do this because it's literally impossible or extremely obscure and arcane. Because if it's one of those, I'm better off going, you said Kagi. I also am using Kagi instead of Google for search. I got to go search for it. I got to go find an answer. I got to call a friend. And there's no solution to that yet. And the more that we learn about how these like foundation models work, the bigger they get, the more normcore they seem to get. And the harder it is to get them to think in unorthodox ways. It doesn't give me a lot of hope. I'm increasingly feeling like we went from 0 to 80 with LLMs this fast. And 80 to 100 is going to take a decade plus. And potentially is impossible, at least down the current trajectory that we're on. It's analogous maybe to VR, right? Like I did VR for the first time in Epcot in 1992, and it was bad. I was in the Sistine Chapel and I could fly around. And I was like, this is amazing. This is incredible. But like, it was like very rudimentary. There's nothing really you could do with it. And it took that fascist guy, Palmer Luckey, to put a ski goggle on his head and be like, I can do this with the phone technology now, right? Like the technology came so far ahead that like consumer grade stuff could be used to do that stereoscopic effect. And that's how the Oculus comes out, and then we have real VR. And it took that long between public awareness and perception and real, genuine mainstream utility. There was this gap where like VR kind of just didn't exist for 20 years. Will we reach a state of AI disillusionment that has a similar gap, right? Where we kind of give up on it for a lot of these purposes, and it goes away and it kind of hibernates, and then in the background, whatever necessary fundamental base research is necessary to get this over the hump between 80 and 100 to really working. Is that what we're about to experience? And honestly, I couldn't tell you, because if all the executives are the ones deciding, they still got a huge hard on for AI stuff. And that doesn't seem to be going away, because like their stock price depends on them being right about AI mattering so much. And it would really take an emperor has no clothes moment to, I think, get the market, the VC, PE, and public equities markets to like unclench their assholes when it comes to AI, to allow for the possibility that it's not great. That could happen. And if it does happen, it'll probably be a pretty swift like repudiation of a lot of these things. But until and unless that happens, the developers I know and trust are typically landing in a similar place to me. That these LLMs are lights out the best way that there's ever been to learn how to program computers, to learn all sorts of stuff, to go from 0 to 80 in understanding and competency. But that last little bit, that expertise, there's still no solution. There's still no replacement for 10,000 hours for really focus. And the problem is, what got you there, what got you to 80 will not get you between 80 and 100, right? If you took the shortcut route of learning the easy way and not struggling, you get to 80% competence in something. The tools, the whole feedback loop that you created for yourself to get dangerous with a technology or with a tool, those tools aren't going to get you any further. It's as if you got to stop the ship in flight and build a whole new one all over again. Like, and figure out, like, how do I, like, from first principles, think through these problems and stuff. I do not envy young people right now who are still trying to figure their shit out. Like, full stop. I don't know. You know, like, liberal arts education was really useful to me because it taught you how to think critically and like how to solve stuff and how to muscle through the struggle of a lot of this. And so I call myself a sadist jokingly, but like that's kind of like that is the work. This is really hard. And the illusion that it's easy, especially for people who are pointy-haired bosses and business types who never really engaged at a deep level with any hard technical craft, who aren't that proficient, they would love for it to be true that like that was not necessary, that they were right to skip over and gloss over that shit. And that's a whole lot of people in my life who never bothered putting in the work to learn how to code before are suddenly very excited about it. And there's two kinds of those people. Like, some are really using the AI tools to learn the hard way, but with an assistant so that they don't have to call me every 2 seconds, because that would be disruptive and not everyone knows me. Or they're the people who are like more like the hustle bros. Like, I'm going to go and build an agentic army of people who, you know, scrape plain details and then resells that, you know. All right, I made myself tired and sad. That's the brand promise here. So I hope wherever you are, whatever you're about to do, you go be tired and sad with me.